On the table lies an open book. On the page, a traveler in armor with a sword in hand, and his path is shown as a battle with demons and monsters to protect people, so he looks not like a fairy tale, but like a vow. The adventurer was considered a hero and honored. He saved bridges, and his exploits were passed down from generation to generation, and a little boy excitedly shouts, "Hero," as if this shout could bring history to life. But suddenly hooligans snatched the book from the boy, loomed over him, and laughed, holding it in their hands to humiliate him right here and now. The boy in the black t-shirt sneered contemptuously and pointed with his finger, as if to say he reads the book himself, while another hooligan began loudly reading a short description, the very one allowed to be seen by others. The mockers laughed even harder and jabbed words at him, hinting that his cowardice meant one thing: he would never become a hero. That day the boy stopped dreaming of heroism and stubbornly decided to become a traveler, but he tried to answer the offenders and suddenly lost his train of thought and could not pronounce a single word properly. A girl appeared on the playground and sharply ordered them to return the book, introducing herself as Ruby, and it was she who was to open the right opportunity for the boy. The man barely opened his eyes and whispered her name, and Ruby sat by his bed, looking intently at him, after which she quietly wished the rats good morning. Rat suddenly sat up in bed and asked what Ruby was doing in his room at all, and the girl embarrassedly replied that she had knocked for a long time, and then simply climbed in through the open window. Ruby was called to wake the rats, and she quickly ordered him to get ready. Today the long-awaited blessing ceremony would finally take place. At the solemn ceremony in the church, children who have turned 12 receive sacred treasures from God, and one woman with a confused expression admits that she will not be able to go with them. The woman asks Ruby to take care of the rats, and Ruby, smiling gently like an old sister, willingly agrees, but the rats grumble, objecting, as if to say they are not younger than her and are the same age. The church is stuffy and cramped with people, and Ruby, glancing at the crowd, compares the ceremony to a bright festival, while Ratsu immediately reproaches her for behaving like a child. Ruby asks Ratsu again if he read until dawn and notices how the rats literally waited for him that day, yet he still overslept. Ratsu admits that he was nervous the whole time, and Ruby replies with gentle confidence that it is natural, as such things happen to a person only once in a lifetime. Ratsu could not get rid of the thought that he would eventually get some strange sacred treasure, but Ruby immediately calmed her with the words, "The chance was slim." Ruby said that the boys only bother them, so she decided to get something truly cool and outplay them, and the rats nodded as if agreeing. Suddenly someone shouted from the crowd that if one of them gets a C rank, he will become a true adventurer. The boys got into an argument over a fair-haired young man who was trying to get a rank no lower than D, although his friend reminded him that he was going to open a fruit shop. Nearby, two girls whispered that they needed a traveler protector not to become travelers themselves, and the rats together with Ruby noticed. A lot of different people gathered for the ceremony. Ratsu notices strangers, squints, and without looking away, thinks, maybe these are adventurers who came on business. Ratsu confidently says, if the adventurers invite them, they will easily become the same without any exam, and he clenches the book tighter convulsively. Ruby nudges him with a memory of their promise to protect people from demons, and Ratsu immediately adds that then they will become the coolest heroes. They look at each other and without hesitation simultaneously declare, yes, they will become adventurers. And just as loud voices of children shouting, "We saw heroes," reach them, they involuntarily stop as if rooted to the spot, listening to the noise and excitement. Ruby excitedly insists that the title will be given to the strongest hero, but at that moment several girls call her by name. Ruby throws to Ratsu, "I'll be back quickly," and heads to the girls, leaving Ratsu without support. Suddenly someone sharply pushes him aside. These are the same rapists who kept bothering him all the time, and one of them, Helio, with a face twisted into a mocking, apologetic grimace, sarcastically says he simply didn't notice such a tiny boy. Helio smiles crookedly and raises his voice, asking if Ratsu also intends to participate in the ceremony. He cuts in with a half-laugh. Ratsu, they say, is such a weakling that he won't be able to fight, so there's no point in coming to the ceremony. Ratsu feels uncomfortable, mutters to himself as if it's really true, and clutches the book, not daring to look directly at the interlocutor. Helio suspiciously twists his lips, declares that Ratsu is unlikely to become a hero even with the artifact, and begins to openly mock him, trying to snatch and throw away the book. At that moment, Ruby appears nearby, ominously and without any hesitation takes the initiative. She utters a firm and sharp order, demanding that Helio return the book immediately. Helio jerks his hand back, throws the book so that Ratsu doesn't manage to catch it, and for a moment tension hangs in the air as if the consequences are inevitable. As they walk on, Helio throws bitter words at Ratsu's back, calls him a coward covered by a woman, and declares that he is not worthy to hold the artifact. The boy finally breaks down from the tormentor's words, and Ruby, bending down to pick up the book, whispered to him not to respond to Helio. She smiled as she handed him the book and encouraged him. He would definitely become a cool hero. The boy silently looked at Ruby and thought that she finally understood his feelings. The church was crowded with people, and the priest began the sacred blessing ritual, calling those present to the altar. While Ruby called him, Ratsa immersed himself in the book, and the blonde decided to go first and moved up to the altar. The priest ordered him to pray, so the boy bowed his head and solemnly sang a prayer, and warm light spread through the window. Everyone squinted from the dazzling rays, and Ratsa, peeking through the gaps between his eyelids, decided that this was probably a blessed ceremony. Suddenly, a huge sea-sworded steel axe appeared in the boy's hands. Ruby covered her mouth in surprise, and the other boys looked at him with obvious displeasure. The boy raised the axe above his head, and without any hesitation showed it to everyone present. Everyone was shaken that the very first participant immediately received the Sarank artifact. The boy shone with joy, and the priest gave him further instructions. The girl with short hair approached the altar, knelt down, and immersed herself in focused prayer, as if the whole space around fell silent. The Sarank artifact, the dagger storm, suddenly flashed in her hands with bright bursts of light, and she, raising the weapon, showed it to those present with a glow of happiness in her eyes. The crowd erupted with joy, as this was already the second Sarank artifact, and people eagerly awaited what would happen next at the altar. Artifacts Sarank are divided into ranks A, B, C, D, E, and F. D is considered average, and already 2 chosen ones have received rank C, which made the atmosphere tense and exciting. Ruby happily whispers to Ratsu that they will definitely also obtain a good artifact, while Ratsu anxiously thinks, today everything really has to change, as Helio approaches the altar. Ratsu is trembling with nerves, and Ruby is trying in every way to cheer him up and lift his spirits, so they catch their breath and suddenly hear that Helio has received the lightning spear rank. Helio is bursting with pride. He slowly looks around at those present, and his friends are gasping with shouts, urging, let him show his spear to everyone. As soon as Helio descends, the travelers immediately call him, inviting him to join their teams, and in the crowd he finds Ratsu and Ruby and smiles slyly. Ratsu thinks that Helio got everything without any effort, and Ruby cannot stand it. She bursts with anger and heads to the altar, declaring that she will get herself a better weapon. She approached the altar, introduced herself, and sincerely thanked the priest, then lowered her gaze and began to pray, quietly begging for her own chance. The man looked at Ruby and could not understand whether she would notice his feelings, hidden in the silence of his gaze. When he was little, he read books incessantly, and over time this passion pushed people away from him until he was left alone. The boys constantly attacked him with mockery and threats, but Ruby always became a shield, believing that someday he would become a hero. During the clash, she fought with Helio, while Ratsu fearfully closed his eyes, as if he did not dare to watch what was happening. She told him that as an older sister she could not protect him forever, so he needed to become strong to become a cool hero. At that moment, he felt that he himself wanted to become like her. Ruby received the A-rank fire dragon sword, and immediately a deep silence fell in the church, as if everyone held their breath. But suddenly the hall exploded with excited cries. Ratsu literally caught her gaze, and Ruby exclaimed with a smile that she had obtained the strongest artifact. The adventurers blocked her way and invited her to join, but Ruby barely fended off their attempts and finally wished Ratsu good luck. He climbed the stairs and sincerely thanked her, and reaching the altar, he said his name and began to pray. He prayed for the strength to turn the weak, tearful boy into a true fighter, for the strength to defeat Helio, and for the strength to fight side by side with Ruby. He needed this strength not for himself, he wanted to protect Ruby at any cost. A faint, bright reflection emerged from the window, and in his palms settled a rusty sword, as if it had long awaited its time. At first everyone was silent, but then Helio and his friends broke the silence with laughter, mocking Ratsu, and asked what kind of junk that was. Everyone laughed, and Ruby approached him and carefully tried to support him, but suddenly the clinking of heels sounded. Ruby sharply turned around. A woman with long light hair confidently moved toward them. The crowd involuntarily parted, and those present watched her with looks full of admiration. It was Paluti who suggested the heroes join her, and from this idea everyone involuntarily gathered in anticipation of adventure. She turned to Ruby with a request to become part of the heroic company, and everyone was impressed by the boldness of the invitation, so Ruby asked to repeat the words. Paluti sharply turned around and impatiently ordered her to follow her. Ruby flinched at the unexpected, commanding tone. Ruby grabbed Rats's hand and ran after Paluti, begging her to stop. Rats had long had a rusted Class F saber in its sheath, and Ruby asked Paluti to take it with her, but the hero only cast a dry glance at the boy's sword. Ruby quietly cut in, "This blade cannot make Rats a true hero." At these words, Rat seemed to lose strength on the spot. He turned pale, clenched the hilt, and his confidence completely collapsed. He had the weakest artifact, and the demons deflected blows with tough skin covered in magic, so with such a low-level weapon Rats wouldn't even be able to scratch the enemy. Paluti explained that Rats's artifact was rank F, and if he went with them, he would only become demon fodder, and then Ruby took Rats's side, refusing to let him give up. She says she will help and extends a hand of support, but the hero turns away while the boy sadly asks her again not to retreat. He looks at her and feels hope breaking. She chooses him, not the hero, so will she really protect him forever? And this fear becomes unbearable for him. He no longer wants to be under anyone's protection because he decided so the day she shielded him from bullies, saving him at the cost of her own safety. He asks her to go ahead and wait there, and the girl looks at him in surprise, but the boy stubbornly replies that he will pass the trial himself and become a traveler. In his thoughts, he curses himself for weakness and for wanting to become stronger to protect her, but aloud he promises to catch up with her and no longer be a burden. Ruby remembers how he once shouted at the monsters, "Get out of the way," ordering them to stay away from her. Then he held her hand tightly, walked ahead, and calmly insisted that she was strong and the monsters were gone. When he returned, he asked her not to cry anymore, although he himself cried through a smile, and Ruby thought that Ratsu was a true hero. She took his head, gently kissed his hair, and whispered that she would wait for him. She asked him to catch up, and in that whisper their new promise was born to hold on to each other despite everything. The book lay open on the ground, and the boys looked at it with obvious displeasure. Ratsu watched Ruby as she walked away and realized he would not be able to fulfill the promise to become a traveler with her, so he made a new promise. He got the weakest artifact, but he stubbornly did not give up. He glanced at the sword and smiled because it was rusty just like himself. He raised the sword to the sun and solemnly vowed to become the strongest hero. Ruby looked at Ratsu and thought that unlike the heroes in the book, he was weak, fussy, and unreliable. She considered him her hero. When monsters attacked them, he covered her with his own body even without a weapon in his hands. In the forest, cries and pleas for rescue spread, but that monster, like a whirlwind, rushed straight at the girls. Nearby, a small monster crawled, growling as if its brakes had failed, and the girls ordered Ruby to calm down. The blonde explained that big monsters usually do not wander closer to villages, but Ruby still kept her sword ready, not taking her eyes off. She was all sweaty and breathing heavily after fear and running, and the blonde suddenly dropped the sword from her hand, and it clanged on the ground. She quietly clarified that those monsters are not the real reason for fear, and their threat is completely different. Ruby warmly recalled how she used to often come to this forest to play with the local children until her voice began to tremble from memories. The blonde asked if her Ratsu was worried, and at those words Ruby suddenly felt sad, as if someone had extinguished a light in the silence of the forest. She shook her head and replied that everything was not quite as it seemed from the first words. The girl in the hat and cloak asked in surprise how children could play here if there are no strong monsters, and Ruby explained, "She is protected from the weaker ones, so now the girls were asked to keep watch." Smiling, the girl said that the hero protected her from trouble. Ratsu's mother was sweeping the yard and suddenly turning around, asked Ratsu what he was going to do next. Dressed as a farmer, Ratsu replied that he decided to help her on the farm because it was the woman who raised him, and he was just about to leave when his mother called him. She held his rusty sword in her hands and said that he had forgotten something very important. She asked if he intended to become a traveler, and the young man confirmed. Then the mother sharply added that he had no time for household chores. He looked at his mother with his mouth agape, and she asked him to promise that if it became dangerous, he would immediately run away. The day was clear, the sun hung in the sky, and birds circled overhead and flew straight up as if drawing a circle. He was indebted to Ruby and her mother and decided to repay everything in full, when suddenly he noticed wheel tracks on the ground. Probably a carriage of some traveler had passed through that place. He looked ahead and already imagined becoming a traveler, and it didn't matter how far Ruby would go from him. He kept replaying in his mind the event that once happened to him and Ruby in this forest, but his thoughts were interrupted by a sound behind him. A tree stood too close, ready to snatch him. He sharply turned around and saw Trent. The monster tree grabbed his leg and pulled him closer like a tight rope. The young man swung and tried to strike the tree with his rusty sword, but the blade caused no damage. Instead, the tree pushed him to the ground. Lying on the ground, the young man felt pain piercing his body because it was a real battle without mercy and without any pauses. He got up, firmly took the sword in his hands, and remembering the promise, moved straight at the monster tree without retreating. In a moment he returned home all battered, and his mother immediately asked if he had run away, but he answered affirmatively. The next day he rushed at the monster again, fervently eager to fight, as if nothing remained from yesterday's clash except a hunger for battle. He fiercely swung his sword at the tree, but the strike yielded no result, only a dull sound, and anger boiled within him. He feverishly spat out that his sword was dull, like an ordinary stick. The next day 2 forest brothers passed by Ratsu, who stood in the same place and stubbornly continued chopping with hardened movements, fighting the tree as if it were an enemy. And then the same thing happened. The next day he was there again and fought the tree with the same zeal, and the day after repeated the attempt again, not allowing himself to stop. 3 years passed since then, and his persistent stubbornness turned into a habit that kept the rhythm of every day. Near the bridge 2 girls argued about how one of them could leave the village, and the tree monster suddenly moved straight toward them. Ratsu rushed forward, entered the fight with his sword, and began cutting the tree relentlessly, striking it repeatedly. The tree froze, and Ratsu glanced at the girls, asking if they were okay. Then suddenly an arrow flew past him and hit the monster right on target, finishing it off. The blonde laughed along with her friend and giggled as if it were her victory, and the girl herself thanked Ratsu for the help. The young man sat silently in the quiet and replayed in his mind. 3 years had passed since Ruby left, and now he looked at his own sword, trying to assess how close he had come to her. 3 years of exhausting training brought only level 10, and from this doubt, like a fever, climbed into his chest and made him sway between determination and fear. Gathering himself together, he firmly said aloud that he needed to work even harder to catch up with Ruby, while the lumberjack boys watched him closely. One of the brothers sharply threw at him, "Training is useless, since 3 whole years have passed since the day he started training, so where is the result?" He stopped his thoughts on the image of Ruby and on her last words that she would wait for him. He sat under a tree, immersed in thoughts, and counted how far she could have gone to the point that he probably wouldn't catch up, closed his eyes and fell asleep. As if through a dream, a child's scream broke the silence, and he abruptly jumped to his feet and rushed to where the sound was coming from. He flew into a clearing where a little girl stood trembling among the bushes, trying to stay in place. It was Ruby. She was frozen among monsters, her lips trembled, and tears streamed abundantly from her eyes from pure fear. At that moment he remembered the same thing that happened earlier. When Ruby was very little, she got lost, and monsters closed in around her from all sides, tightening the hopelessness. As soon as he reaches out to help, a little boy runs up to him, snatches the stick, and begins to drive away the pack of little monsters. He sharply grabs Ruby by the hand and rushes forward, leading her away from the monsters while they rustle and reach after them. Nearby, the older Ratsu sees all this and suddenly realizes this is exactly how he looked in childhood, while the younger Ratsu carefully calms Ruby, holding her close. The older Ratsu lowers his voice for a moment and asks Ruby not to cry anymore, tightly gripping the stick in his hands as if protecting her from all the terrifying things. Senior Ratsu notices how the monsters retreat precisely because of their weapon, and in his thoughts comes to the conclusion they were saved only by the stick. Suddenly he hears Ruby's voice and, with excitement in his voice, asks if he can really become a cool hero. Little Ruby stands before him and says she eagerly awaits the day when he finally becomes a hero. Ratsu abruptly opens his eyes and, to the last pain in his heart, realizes it was all just a dream. He gazes at his artifact, feels how the dream gives him strength, and confidently declares that he will definitely catch up with Ruby. Suddenly screams reach him. He sharply looks around and thinks, could it be that he is still asleep and still clinging to a mirage? He understands that this is not a dream and rushes toward the sound, and in a forest clearing before him stands a little girl, to whom he is almost reaching out his hand. Above the girl looms a gigantic wolf-like demon, and the young man freezes, running chaotic thoughts through his mind. What to do, how to defeat this evil spirit. He recalls, demons, unlike other monsters, have intelligence and, just like humans, receive treasures and rewards from their evil deities. Trembling with fear, the youth opens his eyes wide, looks at the scene, and says haltingly that they are enemies of humanity. Suddenly he hears a conversation, sharply turns around, and sees the lumberjack brothers standing nearby, frozen as if afraid to make a sound. They are already about to flee, but the boy sharply stops them, and the brothers impatiently ask what he is trying to achieve. Raza explains that one cannot run away and leave a little girl to fend for herself, but the brothers object. They cannot handle the demon, so they call the village guards. He warns, just as a person grows by killing a demon, the demon grows by killing people, and therefore with each moment it will only continue to deal with them further. The young man firmly clarifies that by the time the guards reach the village, the demon will have already killed the girl, and then he suggests to the brothers to fight if they have artifacts, although they say those are only of medium level. The brothers retreat in flight, shouting at the end that their artifacts are not suitable for battle, and the young man grips his sword tighter and shifts his gaze to the demon heading towards the little girl. The girl with 2 ponytails trembles with fear, as if petrified under the heavy gaze of the demon and unable to even move. The demon approaches closer and declares that from such a tiny bug only a pathetic enhancement will come out, so he solemnly proclaims, "It is time for her to die." At the moment the demon raises his sword, some guy sharply intercepts his movement and gives the order, "Get away from the girl." The demon freezes half a step away, and the guy abruptly and stubbornly repeats the same words, as if engraving the prohibition in the air. The demon stretches a smile and mockingly replies that he supposedly did not hear him, the voice was too quiet. Tatsu lunged at the demon with a rusty sword, shouting, "Get away from me." The demon stopped the strike with one hand, looked at the guy and said that he had been thinking all along about that trash he was holding, and it turned out that this trash was a sacred artifact. Tatsu pushed the man away and laughed as if the truth had been obvious from the very beginning. He raised the sword, a black aura burst from the blade, and the demon was about to show Tatsu what his blade was capable of. It seemed that with a single swing of the sword he raised a real storm, and Ratsu was knocked off his feet by the shockwave. Above him, a real hurricane opened up, as if the very space was torn apart by the power of darkness. The girl screamed even louder, and the colossal strength of the demon swept the boy off his feet, throwing him through gusts of air. The man realized he could not defeat the demon, so he decided to buy time until the guards arrived. But the demon suddenly appeared behind Ratsu and coldly asked where he got such audacity, why he dared to attack from the very beginning. Smiling with satisfaction and malice, the demon wished death upon Ratsu and raised his sword high, preparing to strike. Ratsu managed to block the attack with his sword, but the demon's strength threw him into the air, breaking his balance. The demon mockingly tells Ratsu that he will not receive even a drop of blessing from such a trifle. Yet he still sensed people. There was a village nearby, and the demon declared that he would go there and, killing everyone, would receive many blessings. The man sat on the edge of the chair, anxiously tensing up, while the monster moved toward the little girl, deciding to kill her first. He swung his large saber at the girl, but suddenly the man shouted and the moment sharply broke. The man rushed at the monster just as it was raising the saber again, and Ratsu managed to block the blow. The demon noted that Ratsu had a decent strike, but it was in vain. He promised to see him later and began pressing the sword against the young man's rusty blade. Suddenly, cracks appeared on the rust of the sword. The rust peeled off in pieces, and the young man involuntarily was surprised by such a result. The demon forcefully threw the young man, and Ratsu lunged forward several meters, after which he cold-bloodedly promised to kill him as soon as he dealt with the little girl. Ratsu lay on the ground and in his own thoughts was already apologizing to Ruby for not keeping the promise made. He bitterly realized he could not keep either the first promise or the second, so he could only hope that Ruby would not get angry. But he did not intend to give up. He clenched the sword in his hands and knew that only he could protect the girl. As soon as he got to his feet, the demon immediately turned sharply, as if expecting his move. They both lunged forward, and Ratsu went into battle with cold determination, no matter what this clash would turn into even death. Their swords clashed again with a powerful strike, and a wave of force thundered over both the demon and the young man, spreading cracks on his blade. Suddenly, the rusty coating from Ratsu's steel sword tore off into the air, confusing the demon, and then the blade became large, clean, and dazzlingly shiny. In the young man's hands was now the cursed S-ranked cursed magic sword. He held a weapon whose power and skills exceeded 500, and it radiated danger. As soon as he rushed at the young man, the demon immediately realized the changes. Both the artifact and the young man's own power were no longer the same. The young man looked intently at Ratsu and firmly understood before him was an S-rank opponent. Ratsu felt a wave of power growing within him. Their clash flared up again, but confidence blazed in the young man's eyes, and the demon found it extremely unpleasant. He sharply shouted at Ratsu, ordering him to speak and not be silent, and also forbidding him to look at him as if he had already lost. The demon missed the strike on the ground, and Ratsu calmly confirmed. He had warned about this from the very beginning. The boy struck the demon for a moment, then immediately continued his speech again, repeating that from the very start he told him, "Stay away from the little girl." The youth did not understand what was happening because his transformed artifact was already overflowing with power, as if it would burst from within. He stubbornly thought, "You cannot lose even if everything went off plan." He stood with his back to the demon, and above their fight in the clearing, a thick column of dust swirled, cut by flashes of movement. The demon says that he was only irritated, and the inflicted wounds are minor scratches. They rushed into battle without any hesitation, deciding to end the duel here and now. Ratsu makes a sharp lunge, his strike pierces the demon, and the demon screams wildly in pain. But suddenly an incomprehensible glow spreads over the place of the clash, and Ratsu glances at it and freezes in confusion. Ratsu's actions provoked magic, and the dark flames began devouring the demon, tearing away the remnants of its power. Not giving the demon a chance to recover, Ratsu delivered the final deadly blow. As it was dying, the demon screeched, not believing that some simple dirty relic could kill it. It vanished, leaving behind only its sword. Ratsu stood still not believing that he had truly defeated the demon. He fell to the ground, and a little girl rushed to him, asking if he was okay, and as darkness began to cover him, he only heard her voice calling his name. He opened his eyes and suddenly sat up in bed in his room. His mother opened the door and was glowing with boundless joy because her son had finally woken up, and she immediately brought him some fruit and explained that the guards had carried him back from the forest. He did not remember the guards, but the image of that girl remained extremely clear in his mind, so he immediately asked his mother about her, and she, placing the fruit on the table, only said, "She is fine." With that, he sighed with relief, and his mother, sitting on the bed, quietly repeated that she had dreamed for 3 years that he would stop fighting monsters. His father's parents lived poorly and were weak until they took up farming, and now his mother, with grateful relief, rejoiced that she had not stopped her son on this path. The little girl, choking back tears, thanked the boy's mother, and at that moment his mother noticed. The boy had become stronger. The boy looked at his mother, and tears suddenly glistened in his eyes. She asked if he would go to take the traveler's trial, and he immediately nodded confidently because he knew his mother needed help, so she hugged him tightly and asked him to promise her something important. Mom asked him not to die and to protect people, even if it would be scary. With tears in his eyes, the boy made the promise, rejoicing that he had such a mother, and then she began to make him confirm another thing as well, and he objected, saying that this was not one promise but a whole series. 3 years passed since the Ruby left event, and Ratsu's journey finally begins, like a long-awaited dawn after a dark night. His final stop is White Rondo, a city for those who dream of becoming true travelers, and he walked firmly and seriously to pass the exam and become one of the heroes. But as soon as he moved the sword, it turned back into a rusty rag, despite the fact that the lumberjack brothers had already made a sheath for it as an apology. He drew the sword and began to master the evolutionary skill. The young man had to release the weapon from his hands and activate its effect by burning his fighting spirit. A battle with a demon flashed in his memory. He acted recklessly then, so now he closed his eyes and persistently thought about only one thing: how much he wanted to become a hero. The sword was cleaned of rust again, and he smiled happily, insisting that even such a simple solution works, but the next moment the weapon already looked like a demon's sword. He drew the destroyer sword, the very one that had defeated the demon, and in Ratsu's eyes flashed the realization: their blades were truly incredibly similar. The guard who escorted Ratsu home took both swords because he did not understand which one belonged to the young man, and Ratsu, looking carefully at the demon sword, recognized all its distinctive features. Ratsu could not leave this artifact at home, so he took it with him, but he lacked the courage to fight with someone else's power, and just then the demon's sword sharply flew upward. The young man's sword also caught in the air, and they began to merge rapidly until the youth froze in shock, opening his eyes and not believing his own sight. Both swords transformed into a single whole and fell silently to the ground, and Ratsu, lifting them, immediately felt a newly acquired skill, black fire, and the ability to synthesize. The youth stood still in amazement and silently stared at what was unfolding right before him. The synthesis of artifacts can enhance the blessed weapon of the evil god, so as soon as he acquires magic, he will be able to use it. The youth thought that synthesis was an incredibly useful skill, and the moment when that demon used black flame surfaced again before his eyes, and now it was synthesized and embedded into his sword. Even though his status remained at 500, it seemed to him as if he held cheat weaponry in his hands, and at that very moment the branch began to crawl toward the young man. Behind him stood many monster trees, and only when he sharply turned around did he notice them. From one of the trees burst a bloody flame trap, and the youth barely managed to jump out of its path at the last moment. Ratsu sighed heavily as if accepting the inevitable and firmly grasped the sword, preparing to enter the fight. He directed the black flame magic onto the blade, and a pillar of giant fire burst from the sword, cutting through the darkness. The burning strikes of his weapon continuously hit the trunks, and the first 3 trees burned to ashes in seconds. The monster trees standing above the charred remains all simultaneously opened their shoot jaws and stared at the young man, noticeably making him tremble under their gaze. Ratu was delighted. Everything he had been promised turned out to be true, so now he could unleash magic and control it. But suddenly a sharp pain pierced him. He helplessly fell to the ground, dropped his sword, clutched his head, and screamed wildly in agony. It felt as if his skull was splitting, and gripped by horror, Ratu stared unblinkingly at the sword, thinking that it was his curse. The monstrous trees crept closer and lunged at the youth with branches, and Ratu froze in fear, convinced they would not let him escape. Suddenly someone ran up and shouted for him not to stir the dust, twigs, and leaves, so fragments of leaves and small branches whirled past him toward the young man. He looked surprised, and sitting right in front of him was a girl, pressing closer and shielding him with her body, anxiously asking if he was all right. The city of White Rondo was gigantic, and its streets were teeming with crowds of people constantly moving back and forth. The hero froze right in front of the Travelers Guild and stared in awe at its gigantic size, unable to believe his own eyes. He firmly decided that this was where the real adventurer's journey began, so he carefully pushed the door and peeked inside, holding his breath. Inside, the building was packed with people, and the youth was even at a loss for words from amazement at the incredible number of visitors and the noise. These were participants of the adventurer's tournament. The hero heard a simple, harsh truth. The chance of success for travelers drops below 1 with each attempt, and when he failed, he had to wait 6 months, but he stubbornly pushed to catch up with Ruby and remembered that day. The girl who was shielding him from the monsters quietly, almost whispering, asked, "Leave it to me and go." He looked at her confusedly, not understanding who she was, whether an adventurer who came to save him or someone else, but what impressed him most was her shield artifact that glowed in the dark. The headache suddenly vanished and the power returned. As soon as his sword turned back to rust and revealed its true nature, he realized it was a cursed magical sword, and that was its true power. He grabbed the thing from his belt and rushed into battle against the tree monsters, holding the rusty sword, while the girl ran to stop him and whispered that she did not believe in his strength. As soon as the sword transformed, he struck the tree and with a powerful jerk shattered the trunk to dust, causing the girl to freeze with a stunned expression on her face. She quickly asked if Ratsu was okay, and he nodded affirmatively, sincerely thanking her for the help. He admitted that he was tired because he had been using the artifact for a long time, and the girl noticed his amazing ability to change. He introduced himself and asked her to say her name, and it turned out the girl's name was Dea Kuretsu. She said it was time for her to go and asked what Ratsu planned to do next. He replied that he was going to rest. She said goodbye and left, and Ratsu silently watched her with his eyes, feeling a simple thought in his mind. Someone had always been by his side and helped him in his life. Now he firmly decided to protect the people he loved and never leave them without help again. The guild hall was packed with people holding all kinds of artifacts, and as soon as everyone glanced to the center, the hall instantly erupted with murmurs of discontent. There stood a little girl. She stepped forward and loudly announced that the examiner was Janet Chamo, and despite her small stature, she had passed the blessing ritual and was already considered an adult. One man disdainfully muttered about a worthless worker, but the girl lifted the doll and clearly told everyone that their task was to find this doll in the forest, and the crowd immediately buzzed happily, saying, "This is too easy." She also added that the forest was full of kobolds who were used to dragging away other people's property, so they could very well have stolen these dolls too. The examiner marked that area as extremely dangerous, filled with monsters, so they would check not only their search but also real combat skills. She explained that other monsters also lived in the forest, and their lives would depend on the participants themselves, and also specified that the number of dolls was limited. At that moment, Radu was suddenly struck with understanding. This would be a competition among participants, where every attempt to outpace others would have a cost. She reminded them that killing people was forbidden as a crime, but at the same time did not rule out the possibility that renegades would attack. Renegades are those who use their own artifacts for evil, selfish purposes. She continued laying out the rules. During the exam, participants were allowed to cooperate. They could form a group, but each still had to find their own doll. The boy bitterly hesitated whether he could find a team at all, when the girl announced the exam open and gave them exactly 2 hours. One boy suggested joining with another, who immediately agreed, and after a handshake they solemnly swore to each other a brotherly oath. He really wanted to find out if they would accept him into a foreign company with his rusty saber, and just then he heard voices. It was Dea. She asked that group of girls to let her in, holding her breath near the entrance. The girls laughed and mocked her, insisting that she was useless, so they stubbornly refused to accept Dea. Ratsu almost froze in memory, because the same mockery that once cut him like a cold blade appeared before his eyes again. The leader of that company explained to Dea that the tribunal survives by destroying demons, and that her sword could not change anything. But the laughter did not stop. The girls shouted again and again that Dea would not even get one doll. Dea stood close to the brunette, repeating under pressure that if no one addresses her, she should not expect others to, even if they are people from the same village. Suddenly the group leader burst out shouting and ordered Dea to go away, raising his hand as if he was going to hit her. Just as Dea sharply prepared to strike, Ratsu stopped her. He pulled Dea away from the blow and firmly said that this was too much, and then the girl broke the pause with a question, who he was. Dea flinched from surprise, and the brunette slyly clarified whether he was familiar to her, and if so, what exactly he was after. He looked straight into Dea's eyes, called her by name, and invited her to join him, offering her a chance to get out of the tension. The crowd froze, watching the scuffle, until the girl who tried to hit Dea looked around at those present in confusion. Ratsu calmly spoke to Dea and declared that they were perfect for each other, as if emphasizing a fatal coincidence. The brunette grimaced with displeasure, and 2 boys, whispering and laughing, discussed Dea and Ratsu, mockingly emphasizing their appearance and nerves. The examiner addressed the 2 participants and informed them that this year they looked promising, and in response heard that among them there were dangerous ones. Then the girl added that she would support those who were ready to take risks. 30 minutes passed since the start of the test, and in the forest the trees suddenly sparkled, as if hinting at the approaching danger. The girl and the boy walked through the forest, carefully examining every path and admiring the beauty around them, while their thoughts revolved around the fact that if it weren't for the monsters, this land would have long become a tourist location. The boy tries to warn her against fighting monsters, but honestly admits that they won't succeed quickly either, so he suggests finding kobolds as soon as possible, and the girl again remains silent, as if she lacks words. The man quietly thinks that probably the reason for her silence is not the monsters, but that she does not want to talk to him. Her distance remains stubborn and eloquent. The girl stops and addresses Ratsu directly. She asks what exactly he meant when he said they were compatible, and restrained tension sounds in her voice. She stood still, blushed, and tried to look away, and then the boy finally realized that he had completely misunderstood everything. She barely managed to hear him begin to explain why they were compatible, when suddenly she sharply shouted, "Monster!" The monster sprang from its place and rushed at Ratsu, and the girl managed to cover him with her sword just in time. Ratsu draws his sword and with one strike cuts the monster in half, and without taking his eyes off her, says, "You cover, I destroy monsters, so we are the perfect pair." Ratsu explains that if he uses the weapon for more than 30 minutes, he will start to have a headache, and if it lasts even longer, he might completely lose his mind. The girl shakes her head doubtfully because she fears she won't be able to protect him as she once did, since once she herself was a crybaby whom everyone laughed at. He approached her and said, even if her artifact is not capable of killing monsters, she is kind-hearted, so she must come to the aid of strangers. Smiling, he confidently said that she is truly strong even in the most dangerous moments. Suddenly, someone sharply waved their hand, using magic, and cast a spell that raised a strange glow in the air. Explosions sounded, and from the thick smoke the boy and girl coughed, covering their faces. In this smoke appeared the same girl who earlier wanted to hit Daya, and now it became clear. Her name was Aimsty. She told the girl that she could only hide, and now it was time for Aimsty to crush her. Daya hid behind the shield and, not understanding the order, asked what exactly she was supposed to do. Another girl replied that fighting renegades for dolls was allowed, but they objected. No one had taken the dolls yet, and they randomly pointed at something behind. Raising his elbow, Kobold rushed at them from behind, and the girl instantly reacted, covering herself with the shield. There was only one Kobold, but he continuously tried to break through the girl's defense. The man loudly called Daya and sharply pointed his finger at the doll hanging on the Kobold's belt. The girls shouted at Rachi and Daya, calling them thieves because they themselves were running after the same doll, and now the boy and girl were about to snatch it. Aimsty shook her head and said there was no way out, so she ordered her friends to attack Daya and Ratsu, and the two girls immediately rushed into battle. The man instantly understood the plan. It was done deliberately, and the girls synchronously activated ice and fire magic against them. Ratsu and Daya met the attack prepared, holding their breath, while on the other side the Kobold fled scaredly on the run, escaping the trap. The girls rushed forward in an attack with their artifacts, and a powerful explosive wave rolled through the air. But despite the blow, nothing happened to them. Daya's shield managed to protect them, and the Kobold and Ratsu only looked at each other in surprise. Ratsu immediately realized that the Kobold was about to try to steal his sword, so he instantly jerked his hand back, giving no chance. At that moment, Aimsty again used magic against Daya and Ratsu, trying to break the defense from within. The shield still stood firm, blocking all attack trajectories for the girls, and Aimsty laughed arrogantly. "You will not win if you fight only defensively." The boy leans closer to Daya and asks if she is okay, and she replies with a warm, confident smile that there are no problems. Aimsty sarcastically says that they cannot defeat the monster but still insists, as if everything is fine, and adds that they really are a perfect couple. Daya talks about the shield that withstands even the strongest blows, and shows a rusty sword as if it is already worthless. Suddenly, the Kobold wildly lunges at Aimsty, and the girls immediately notice this and start preparing to attack. Right at this moment, the boy's sword seems to come alive. Rust flies off the blade, revealing clean, battle-ready steel. The girls rush into attack, but the Kobold sharply recoils a step back from them, as if springing into motion, and immediately aims for a strike from behind. Ratsu suddenly delivers a lightning-fast blow, and the girls freeze, looking at him with fear and surprise, as they did not expect such a turn. Kobold cuts the girl's artifacts in half, and the doll he controls heavily falls to the ground, rolling in the dust. Aimsty fiercely interrogates how he managed to do that, and shows that the girls had C-rank artifacts, then demands that he state his name and who he is. The man replies that he is a participant just like her, and adds, Daya is also a participant. Aimsty clenches her fists while the boy continues without stopping, insisting that if they had Daya, she would definitely have protected them. He incessantly scolds the girls, passionately listing all the virtues of Daya, while Aimsty, unable to bear it, shouts, "Shut up." She raises her voice even more sharply and cuts him off with the words, "You don't know my feelings." Aimsty and Ratsu silently meet each other's gaze, then Ratsu suggests fixing the artifacts in the church and escorting them to the city, which literally paralyzes the girls with shock. The boy regrets destroying their artifacts, but Aimsty does not let him finish and coldly orders, "Get out." The girls walk away, refusing the boy's help, and Daya watches them with her gaze and calls Aimsty, but still does not look back. A toy doll remains lying on the ground, and the boy quickly bends down, picking it up. He speaks gently, trying to encourage the girl, saying that thanks to this doll she will be able to become a traveler. But the girl bursts into tears because she wanted everything to be the same as before, and the boy asks what happened to them. Daya recalls their friendship with Eamsty from the very beginning and how Eamsty taught such a crybaby as her everything. Eamsty helped the girl with everything, both with studies and training, staying close so naturally as if they were sisters while friends whispered, and Eamsty only nodded reservedly, hiding her gaze deep within herself. The girl whispered angrily to herself that it definitely had to be her turn and clenched her fists in rage, as if she could make reality obey. Her memory flashed quickly, how she looked for ways to run even faster, how she trained herself not to lose in a fight, and how she finally mastered the art of fast learning, from which her heart trembled with victory. She always pulled more than anyone else, exhausting herself but not giving up, and sincerely tried to befriend everyone nearby, reaching out as if she could grasp friendship from the shadows. Her faith was extraordinarily simple and stubborn: become better and never be lonely again, so she looked forward as if every step already promised warm company. Then in the church she was given a beer-engraved bracelet, and everyone around considered her the best. Daya glowed with incredible happiness. She reached out, sincerely thanked Daya and wished her luck, while the girls meanwhile gathered closer and greeted her warmly. Suddenly in the silence she heard that someone was awarded an immortal shield, and the words sounded, sharply changing the mood in the whole hall. Near the altar stood Daya with a huge immortal shield, looking at Eamsty and not believing her own eyes, as if reality had been swapped in an instant. Having convinced herself that her voice was trembling, she quickly stepped closer and apologized to Eamsty. The girl asked Daya what she meant when she said sorry, and Eamsty looked surprised. Why were these words addressed to Daya and not to her, as if all the years of training suddenly turned into a futile effort? She sharply decided to herself she would not regret the one who took everything from her, and her thoughts returned to reality as soon as the friends asked what to do with the broken artifacts. Eamsty calmed them down and promised she would fix everything quickly, pass the exam, and not even leave them with doubts, confidently assuring that they would definitely become traveling adventurers, and then sincerely thanked them for staying with her. After that, they talked about the boy whose sword had changed, and the girls recalled the wave of emotions that overwhelmed them then, until Eamsty ordered them to continue. Suddenly, something strange appeared behind the girls, and Eamsty screamed so that her friends could dodge at the last moment. They barely managed to dodge the attack when a toothy strike instantly rushed past. But the creature still managed to reach them. It bit the skin, and the girls' hands were wrapped in bloody, huge scratches. Before them emerged a cat-like monster, licking its claws with bloody prey, and it growled, incredibly disappointed because they had not noticed it at all. Eamsty stood nearby and looked at the demon, trembling with fear so much that he almost choked on his own breath. Daya told the rats about her desire to be friends with Eamsty again like before, dreaming of becoming an adventurer and setting off on adventures together with her childhood friend. The boy gently encourages her and confidently says that there is no need to go back, since they can become travelers together. He offers her a proposal, to be his girlfriend, not his sister, and a blush immediately flashes in her eyes, like a wave that covers her completely. The man continues, stating that she is no longer his little sister who always follows behind, but now his friend, the one who will stand beside him. The girl noticeably brightens and nods gratefully to Ratsu. She suddenly begins to carefully think about how exactly the demon appears during the attack, and her skill forms into clear logic. While the skill is active, she cannot move actively, so she must act instantly at the right moment. Without hesitation, the girl sharply strikes the demon, and it abruptly recoils from the blow, clearly not expecting such a bold move from her. Eamsty firmly asked her friends to step back while she kept the demon at a distance, but the girls did not want to leave her alone, yet Eamsty stubbornly insisted. Let them go, because they would only interfere and distract her. But the demon, as if sensing her concentration, again sharply struck Eamsty. Daya was shaken, suddenly stopped, and Ratsu anxiously asked why she froze in place. The girl felt a pang in her chest as if something terrible had already happened to Eamsty, and she only said quietly to Ratsu that she needed to leave. Eamsty's friends screamed and anxiously rushed to her, trying to pull her out of the dangerous moment and prevent the worst. The demon licked blood from her nails, and Eamsty calmed her friends, convincing them that these were only scratches, and pushed them to step back further. The girl shouted for them to run away, and her friends, with tears in their eyes, scattered in different directions without looking back. The demon burst out laughing, as if mocking hope, and said it was pointless, he would catch up and kill them anyway. The girl blocked his way, not letting him pass, and pointed to his weak spot, hoping to buy at least a moment. But the demon suddenly appeared very close and began strangling the girl with his tail, squeezing her tighter and tighter. The demon glanced sideways at the girl and asked if it was about the weakness that forced her to leave invisibility exactly during the attack. The demoness boldly explained, she covers her vulnerability with her own speed, and as soon as she kills Imsti, she will immediately catch up with the twins and deal with them. Clenching the artifact in her fist, the girl thought of nothing but how to buy time and sharply asked the demon why he attacks people. The demoness replied that she receives a blessing by killing people just as people receive a blessing by destroying demons, but there is another reason why she chooses this. She loved playing with other people's lives, so she began scratching the girl's face with her claws and ordered her to scream, beg, and obey before dying. The demon flared up with irritation at her indifference and decided to put an end to everything. She stubbornly remained silent. Her bracelet was charged to the brim with magical power, and the girl, without hesitation, struck the demon with a powerful electric discharge that burst like lightning. The demon was thrown several meters away from the girl, and a thick column of smoke and sparks rose into the air, as if an explosion shattered the silence into fragments. When the smoke finally cleared, there was nothing left before her, only empty space and trembling air, and she already considered that she had won a few moments for her friends. And suddenly a demonic voice sounded very close. The lightning was the source of its speed, so its magic did not have time to work, and fear overwhelmed the girl completely. The demon lunged at the girl and with a fierce swipe of its claws pierced her arm, leaving bloody streaks. The girl screamed, and it seemed that the demon really woke up from her voice, so it ordered her to scream even louder and promised to tear her to pieces. Amsti thought only of her friends and prayed that they would manage to escape. The demon roared as if it was going to start with her limbs, and the girl, holding her breath, prepared for a new lightning strike. The girl cried, and in her thoughts she was already shouting for help, feeling how fear tightened her throat and pulled her into the abyss. Suddenly a stranger's silhouette flashed to her. Someone ran up, shouting feverishly as if urging time itself, and his footsteps echoed loudly in the darkness. The demon lunged at Amsti and crashed into the shield so that sparks ran along the metal, and Dea immediately began to calm the girl so that she would not panic. She held the shield firmly and promised to protect her to the end, not taking her eyes off the dark threat. The monster was glowing with its new prey and released black flames of magic, trying to break through the defense. But as soon as it made another attack, the black flames again hit the shield, and Ratsu and two of Amsti's friends were already running along the road. One of the girls began to apologize while the other restrained her and asked to give Amsti first aid, and looking at them, Dea felt her bad premonition return. As it turned out, on the way the girls encountered Dea and Ratsu and told them in detail everything that had happened. They bandaged Emezdi's wound, and she firmly assured that she had survived. Emezdi looked at Dea and asked why she had saved her life if Emezdi had been saying nothing but lies about her all along. Dea smiled and without unnecessary words replied that she had saved her only because they were friends. Emezdi flinched and screamed, and at that moment the demon again emerged from oblivion, angrily beginning to interrogate the girl about her friends. The demon wanted to see tears of pain, not tears of peace, and without hesitation rushed forward, ready to tear her friend to pieces right before her eyes. But suddenly Ratsu's sword lunged forward, rising with claws in a ramming charge, and collided head-on with the demon. The demon hoarsely and authoritatively ordered him to step aside and not stand in his way, but the man, only with stone-like determination, asked, "Allow him to do this." A fierce fight broke out between them, and dark thunder echoed repeatedly in the air along with black fiery curses that sparked in the darkness. Yet he blocked all her strikes and landed his own blows. The demon barely managed to dodge until the boy with one sharp move struck and cut off the demon's tail. The demon howled loudly in pain, his figure trembled, and in furious rage he wildly swore that the rats would pay for this. Rat still felt a lack of combat knowledge and experience, but with this sword he had no other choice, so he had to defeat the demon, when suddenly a headache pierced him and he dropped the sword. He grabbed his head while the demon tried to understand why the artifact had suddenly changed, and why the hero was holding his head in panic. Perhaps this artifact had a limited duration. As soon as the timer ran out, it began to behave differently, frightening even experienced opponents. The demon threw a mocking nickname at the boy, sharply turned around, and not giving him time to recover, burst into an attack in a raid. But Dea again parried the sword strike, yet this only made the demon even more furious and burned with rage, as if the blow had hit not him, but his pride. The demon promised to crush Dea's artifact, but Amethyst cut him off with words. It is impossible, for the strength was infinite. The shield itself bore the name Eternal Shield. The demon was confused and furiously outraged. The girl had managed to obtain such a powerful artifact. The demon declared that the boy's sword and the girl's shield were disgusting, and even despite this, he was not going to save them, so he began to disappear, and Dea closed her eyes. It was then that the vanished demon suddenly returned to attack, but Dea effortlessly parried his strike without even losing her stance. The demon raged in panic, vanished again, then appeared out of nowhere and repeated the attack, but Dea parried the blow just as confidently. The sweaty demon, scared and exhausted, asked who they were, although none of them was an adventurer, and at that moment the rats realized that Dea's defense was not accidental, but a deliberate skill. It was not that Dea foresaw the monster first, she glimpsed the future, as if in a cold lightning flash before her eyes. The demon disappeared again into the darkness, and the rats, trembling with impatience, asked the girl to indicate exactly where the enemy was hiding. Dea closed her eyes and sharply waved her hand in the direction where the demon was supposed to emerge, and the rats immediately struck him as soon as he slipped out and prepared to attack. But the demon dashed aside and jumped out of the strike's trajectory, and the rats only managed to realize he was too fast, even for coordinated movements. The vengeful demon promised to slaughter them all, and the boy in despair thought that even if he could defeat her, he would not keep up with Amethyst while she tried to attack again. She struck the demon with a powerful thunderbolt, and the air around cracked from the force of the blow. The demon screamed back at her as if reminding her that she herself had already said, "Nothing will work," but the girl shouted fiercely that the time had come. At that moment, Ratsa suddenly appeared behind the demon and delivered a deadly blow, causing even the shadow to shudder. He cut the demon in two with a sword, and after a brief flash, the demon vanished, leaving behind trembling dust. The girls froze in amazement, and Dea, filled with admiration, told him that he managed to kill the monster. He explained that it all happened thanks to Dee, and then, looking at Amesty, added that she also deserved credit here. The man sincerely thanked her, and the girl was so flustered that she could not gather a response. Suddenly, a sharp signal thundered in the air. It was the end of the exam time, and the silence seemed to break off. The man shifted his gaze to the doll and froze before the choice, to become a traveler himself or to give this chance to Dea. In the forest, a group of boys combs through the thickets searching for the girl and desperately trying to find her before she reaches the city, unaware that she is watching them from behind the trees. She was wounded, but the healing magic quickly closed the wound, as if time had turned back. She froze in place amid the silence of the streets and strained to look into the city, as if studying every shadow. The men approached Ratsu and asked to meet with them after the exam to talk about the demon. The boy agreed, then shifted his gaze to the doll in his hands. He did not take his eyes off the doll for a long time. He examined it carefully but still did not understand what exactly he had to do next until Dea called him. He approached her, placed the doll in her hands, and confidently said that she would become an adventurer. The girl refused, saying that he was the one who defeated the demon and got the doll, but the boy sharply replied that if it were not for that day with Dea, he would not have survived these adventures. Seeing that the girl began to defend the stranger without any hesitation, the boy finally believed her kindness is capable of saving many people. He briefly took her hands, greeted her shortly, and just as he took a step forward, Amesty asked how long this freak intended to keep the girl's hand. Amesty looked carefully at the two of them and asked if they were a couple. The boy blushed and got confused because the girl asked her friend to go rest. She said she was injured, and Amesty said she was about to, but before that, she still decided to give her the doll. Ratsu snatched the doll from her hands, and the girl replied that she was taking it for temporary use because it was not suitable for 3 people. Dale, holding his breath, looked at Amesty with sincere admiration and could not contain his amazement. Amesty ordered Dea not to forget about her, promising that she would catch up soon, and Dea enthusiastically vowed to wait. While they watched the girls leave, someone approached them and pointed to this pair, saying that they were the only 2 who had not yet completed the procedure. That was Janet. She apologized for allowing the demon to invade their territory, sincerely thanked them, and warned that from now on their lives would become more dangerous. After that, she solemnly introduced Ratsu and Dei as adventurers, as if confirming their new status. Later, they sat in the tavern at a table, holding glasses, and the girl tried to stop the boy, explaining that it was too expensive. The boy recalled how on the way home from the guild he overheard a conversation. The guild, as an apology, allowed Aimsty and her friends to take the exam in just a week. Dea beamed with joy for them, and the boy calmly told her not to worry, dispelling her anxiety with a confident tone. They could not become travelers together immediately, but the girl promised that someday they would definitely go on an adventure together. Ratsu told the girl that he also had a person for whom he once promised to become a traveler. He admitted that he was once weak and that person always had his back, so the girl immediately understood everything and asked if he wanted to join him. That man shook his head and replied that he was not ready yet. First, he had to raise his own level. Dea suddenly remembered the promotional test and awkwardly confessed that she wanted to rise above the white level, which made Ratsu freeze. She explained that she wanted to go through the dangerous Shuriken cave, where only adventurers above the white level could enter. Ratsu asked the girl why she needed that cave, and she answered bluntly, it was precisely the reason why Ratsu became an adventurer at all. The girl confessed that her parents once entered that cave and never returned, so now she wanted to go there again to finally find out what happened to them. The man froze at the very moment when he was about to ask the girl about her parents, but she suddenly stood up and interrupted him, changing the course of the conversation. She suggested that they join forces, saying that they were a perfect couple, and at first the boy just silently looked at her, but then unexpectedly laughed and asked her to explain how she came to such conclusions. Seeing the girl suddenly blush, the boy said that he had heard that somewhere before, stood up, sincerely thanked her, and declared that he was very happy, then began to tell why he decided to become a traveler. He chose the path of a traveler to become a hero and save people, and asked the girl if his goal sounded reasonable. She smiled and replied, yes. They promised each other that they would do everything possible to become truly great adventurers. The examiner was waiting nearby for Ratsu and Dea, anxiously glancing at the corridor and then at the door. The boy and the girl approached, greeted her, and politely asked how they could help. The examiner awkwardly admitted that the demon was so scared that she forgot to give them a very important thing. She placed 2 books before them and solemnly said that this was exactly what they were looking for, after which the boy and the girl took them and asked in surprise what exactly they meant. As it turned out, these were proofs of fulfilling the request for the traveler's diary. Now the heroes could collect their rewards and stamps. Ratsu again started asking about the stamp, and Jenny explained, if you collect a certain number of stamps, you can take a promo test, so Ratsu and Dea instantly got excited about this idea. Jenny said that this town was created especially for beginner adventurers. The requests here are quite simple, and the rewards and stamps are small. She immediately gave them perfect local tasks, and at first they had to find a dog. Ratsu could hardly believe that this could be considered an ideal challenge. Ratsu and Dea thought they would get at least a small reward for this, but it turned out to be just the beginning. The examiners suggested they change the base of operations to get more expensive tasks. The woman focusedly laid out unusual tasks before them, explaining that both the copper class and the black class of travelers take on these. Jenny recalled the disappearance of the traveler. Dea immediately began demanding more details, and Ratsu did not rush to decide and resolved. At least for now, he would go search for the dog. A little later, Ratsu returned to Dea with apologies for taking the task without prior discussion. The girl assured him it was not a problem, but sharply asked why he had done so, and Ratsu replied that he was interested in the request as soon as it arrived. The dog they were searching for disappeared this morning near Nanashiki Forest, in the very place where they took the exam, so it would be dangerous and inappropriate if the impatient owner went to look for it alone. The boy suggested that Janet might have given them this task deliberately so they would look more closely, but Dea suddenly stopped him. They hid behind bushes and quietly peeked at the clearing from where a strange sound came, and kobolds were crowding there. The kobolds noticed them and formed a circle, and Dea called out to Ratsu, ordering him to look around. The kobolds closed the ring around the boy and girl, tightly curling around them as if trapping them. The crowd of kobolds held their breath and prepared to attack. Ratsu began to think if the kobolds were alone, dealing with them would not be very difficult, but against such a crowd Dea probably wouldn't manage to cover them, so he calmed Dea and firmly stated that he had a plan. At that moment, iron claws grew from his hands exactly like the demon they had just defeated. Dea shouted sharply, "This man is using artifact synthesis." Cobalt froze in confusion, and the young man began to summon black flames of magic. He combined two types of magic, pouring dark lightning magic into the black flames, mixing the power in one fiery burst. Day froze in place from what she saw, and Ratsu with one strike smashed the kobolds and quickly cleared the area of them. But as soon as the sword touched, Ratsu received a strong electric shock, and the girl anxiously asked if he was okay. When Ratsu came to, she asked what had happened, and fearfully began to explain that her artifact has a unique ability to synthesize weapons and skills. It turned out that two different skills can be embedded in one artifact, and the young man was burning with desire to try to activate them both at the same time. The girl replied that it really is an unusual artifact, and Ratsu thought, the brain can still handle activating dual magic while the body has already paid its price. Hiding behind the bushes, the girl pressed a small puppy to her chest and watched them closely until it suddenly barked, instantly attracting the attention of Ratsu and Day. The girl took off running, and following the bark without hesitation went Day and Ratsu. Suddenly she stumbled and fell, and the worried Daya immediately asked if everything was all right, but Ratsu stopped her to help. Ratsu held the girl and carefully looked at her injuries, noticing dark marks on her body that did not look accidental. At that moment it became clear to everyone, this girl was a demon. Dia noticed something strange. She showed no sign indicating demons, while the young man hesitated whether he should immediately report this to the guild. Demons were enemies of humans, but before him stood a girl who could easily be mistaken for a human if a hat was placed on her head, and the young man was already thinking whether it was time to just kill her. Since childhood, he had been engrossed in stories about heroes and firmly held one conviction: demons are enemies who must be destroyed. All the demons they had already encountered truly brought misfortune to people, but now the young man had doubts about this very girl. He questioned himself again and again, whether the woman before him was a real demon and whether it was true that she was his enemy. Seeing the artifact in his hands, the demon almost shuddered with fear, as if sensing an unknown threat in it. The young man was also frightened. He was plagued by doubts since demons had already attacked him, but he still felt no hostility in this object, and the little dog began barking loudly. He reached out his hand to the artifact but suddenly stopped. He froze for a moment, as if listening to his own thoughts. Before his eyes flashed bloody images of previous demons who had already tried to kill him, and this chilled his chest. He was very eager to understand how the hero would behave in his place, and how exactly Ruby would react, making the tension in the air thicken even more. He dismissed all doubts and was already about to take the matter into his own hands, but suddenly someone shouted sharply from way too close. The demon with closed eyes begged for help, and Ratsu, who was already reaching for his sword, involuntarily froze in place. He carefully extended his hand to the demon, as if trying to convince her that he came not to harm. Ratsu apologized to her for scaring her, and the girl sighed with relief and stood up, calming the trembling in her hands. Dia literally lit up with joy. It was the same little dog, and the demon explained that she stayed nearby because he looked lost. Ratsu asked the demon what he was doing here and whether she had gotten lost by accident, but he averted his gaze and answered briefly, "No." The boy said that it was dangerous to stay alone there and offered to escort her home, but the demon sharply cut him off. "She has no home." If she has no home, then she couldn't have gotten lost either. This logic hit Ratsu's head, and she became so awkward that she almost lost the power of speech. The demon released the dog and ordered him to go with the travelers, but the little animal did not want to stay far from him and struggled with all its might to get back. The dog knocked the girl down and began fervently licking the demon, who chuckled and asked him to stop immediately. Ratsu and Dia also laughed at such a cute sight, and then Ratsu suggested taking the demon to the Adventurers Guild. The demon again asked her question, and the young man assured her that they would hide the fact that she was a demon, after which both began secretly planning how to reach her home unnoticed. But suddenly the demon stopped them and, calmly assuring that everything was fine, asked to be left alone for a moment. Suddenly a spear flew with a whistle toward the demon, and Ratsu instantly oriented himself and blocked it with his body. The young man and the demon fell to the ground, and Dia screamed in fear, noticing the danger right nearby. Ratsu anxiously asked Dio if she was okay, and she quietly replied that she felt fine herself, but the little dog was injured. The demon frowned in surprise and asked why Ratsu helped her at all, since she was a demon. The young man said that even if Dio was a demoness, she was still not an enemy, and at that moment memories suddenly flashed sharply in the demon's mind like lightning. The demon instantly folded her fingers and applied restorative magic, enveloping Ratsu in a warm glow to heal him. Ratsu got up completely healthy, and Dio was impressed by the demon's magic, because the boy had no idea why his ability to see the future still had not activated. A stranger approached the travelers and brazenly ordered, "Make way." It was Helio, and confidently standing beside him were his friends, as if they had come for their own. His companions asked who this young man was and why he was bothering the travelers, and Helio replied that Ratsu could not be called an adventurer. Ratsu replied that he himself had become a wanderer, and at these words Helio burst out laughing. He ironically asked if the guild was already so short of people that they would take them. Then Helio sharply demanded an answer from the young man about the demon's protection, leaving him no chance to evade. Ratsu answered that it was just a child and there was nothing dangerous in it, but Helio immediately shouted, insisting that he must know, humans and demons are enemies, because Ratsu had already read a bunch of books. Helio's companion asked if Ratsu was okay, and he explained that they were hunting the demon because they suspected him of involvement in the disappearance of that man. Ratsu and Day recalled the words of Lady Janet, after which the demon grabbed Ratsu's hand and began to assure him that he was not involved. Helio declared that if the young man did not hand over the demon, he would deal with him right there, without further talk. He aimed his spear at them and was about to attack, but his friends tried to stop him, and he only sharply ordered them to shut up. With a malicious look, Helio announced that he would kill the demon, and his words sounded like a verdict. Ratsu asked Day to protect the demon, and he himself stood across Helio's path, not stepping back a single step. Helio ordered him to get out of the way once more for the last time. The young man drew a rusty sword, the metal scraped against the scabbard, and firmly replied that he refused. Helio and Ratsu clashed in a fierce fight, blows rained one after another, and the air was filled with a thick ringing of steel that was all that could be heard. Just as Ratsu was about to strike with the sword, Helio treacherously jumped up and punched him right in the face, knocking the wind out of him. In the crowd, a man helplessly fell to the ground, and Helio immediately pounced on him, loudly insulting and kicking him. Friends begged Helio to stop, but he did not listen, and only then Dee sharply shouted at Helio and ordered him to cease the attack. Helio froze, stunned, shifting his gaze, then calmly looked at Dee and told the rats that someone else was still holding the defense for him. He covered his face with his hand and declared that seeing such a pathetic boy annoyed him, and Dyer boldly retorted that he looked down on everyone. The boy asked if she knew who she was talking to, and Dee honestly replied that she did not know and instead asked him who he was. He raised his spear, swinging to strike her, but the rats timely intercepted his move, putting a sword in the way of the blow. Helio shuddered because the artifact unexpectedly turned out to be altered, and the rats additionally asked Dea to protect the demon. One of Helio's comrades whispered to his friend that there was a chance to catch the demon, but he suddenly stopped him, not allowing the thought to develop. Helio prepared for battle with the confidence that if the weapon had changed externally, then inside no shifts had occurred. The rats began to estimate what Helio's power was capable of, and he, deep inside, remembered he had 3 years of combat experience. He knew he would not defeat the opponent by approaching Helio head-on, so he did not attack directly but called upon magic. His sword flickered with a black stream of lightning, and it seemed as if the power was about to burst out. When the first attacker won, the rats went mad with rage and decided to destroy the Helio artifact. Helios boldly shouts back to him that they are different and is already eagerly preparing for a new strike. But despite the challenge, Rat delivers the first blow and shatters the Helio artifact into pieces, leaving behind a flash and the crackling of glass. Helio's friends were shocked by what they saw, and when the boy apologized to Helio, he remained motionless, not even raising an eyebrow. Rats, addressing the rats, clarifies whether they really think they defeated Helio by breaking the artifact, then suddenly grabs the boy by the shirt and pulls him closer. The boy is forcefully thrown to the ground and Rats freezes over him, preparing to strike, contemptuously calling him trash. Helio growls that she is defending the enemy, and Rats explains that she was the one who helped him, and asks if they will become enemies just because she is a demon. The demon watches them silently through anxiety, while Helio continues to growl at the boy and demands that he say these words to the people whose families were killed by demons. Helio scolds Rats for his intention to betray the people for the sake of the demon and, as if throwing a bitter memory into his head, restores his memory of how Rats once dreamed of becoming a hero. In response, Rats bursts out shouting, proving that he is not a traitor and helps everyone who asks for help. Helio decisively grabs his artifact, raises it above himself to strike, calls Rats his enemy, and freezes in a fighting stance before the attack. But suddenly, people in cloaks appear in the air and sharply stop the fight, interrupting the swings halfway. The guild's staff-bearer steps forward one step and reminds the strict rule forbidding adventurers from fighting each other, promising punishment to all involved. A crowd gathered near the church and people whispered among themselves, claiming that the renegade had already been caught. Jenny involuntarily froze for a moment, sensing the commotion in the air, and saw Ratsu and Helio right in front of her. Miss Jenny explained what the guild workers had noticed. The travelers were using artifacts for combat improperly. She shifted her gaze to both interlocutors and asked if they had anything to say in response. Helio sharply raised a finger, poked Ratsu with it, and loudly called him a deserter. Ratsu begins to recount how he came to defend the demon, and Miss Jenny, with a cold, attentive look, asks if it is true, after which Ratsu lowers his head and quietly confirms. Dea asks Ratsu to tell everything as accurately as possible word for word, exactly as it happened, without any embellishments or omissions. Helio abruptly turns away from Ratsu and mockingly remarks that he expected at least enough courage to fight back, but Ratsu just waves him off, claiming that the weak one is Helio, who still lacks the spirit to say what he thinks. But at that very moment, one of Helio's friends sharply sides with Ratsu and reveals the truth. The first attack was made by Helio himself. His friend says aloud that Helio betrayed them, and immediately the atmosphere thickens with a sense of shock and a rift in friendship. The boy stubbornly insists that it is also his fault, because if they were true friends, they would not have stood aside and pretended nothing happened. The employee opened the door and Jenny immediately asked if the interrogation was already finished, after which he came closer and quietly whispered something in her ear. Ginny, standing up, replies that Ratsus's and the demon's stories coincide, so she punishes Helio's group. She suspends them for a week and confiscates their artifacts. One of Helio's friends grabs him by the hair and the other nudges him with his elbow, urging him to move forward. Helio orders him not to waste time on childish adventure games and turning around adds, Ratsus will not become like her. Dea looked at them confusedly while Jenny opened another door and sharply called inside. The girl asked why he did not fight back and the boy just laughed, and Dave thought that was exactly what was funny. Miss Jenny suddenly stopped, gathered herself in attentive silence, and carefully, without averting her eyes, examined them both. The man continued to insist that it was not at all about unwillingness to answer, because he truly wanted to help the demon. The examiner sternly asked if he really intended to become a renegade for the sake of the demon. The man barely nodded, and Miss Jenny squeezed the door handle so tightly as if she was about to catch the moment when the door would finally open. A demon bristled in the room, so Miss Jenny, without hesitation, declared that the girl had nothing to do with the disappearances of people. The travelers were just reaching for joy, but Jenny sharply cut off their celebration and warned, "This is not the end yet, there is another trouble." After this, it became clear that the demon's life was already in danger. Other demons forced him into being hunted and made him a target. It was at that moment that Ratsu finally understood the real reason why the demon was hiding in the forest. He was not just being searched for, he was being tracked. Miss Jenny gave the travelers the order to deliver the demon straight to the guild headquarters. Next to the stone fountain, Helio sat with his friends, and the boy with disheveled hair was still boiling with anger because his insult was not so easy to forgive. When he grumbled incessantly and was asked how much longer he intended to stay angry, Helio suddenly turned to his friend and sharply asked why they still hadn't contacted the guild. The friend did not answer with words, he only pulled out a scrap of paper and declared that he wanted to gain recognition with it. On that paper was written, "Ruby destroyed one of the 7 great demons," and as soon as Helio read it, rage instantly flared up inside him. At night, the travelers and the demon left the city, conversing so confidently as if everything had gone perfectly. There were significantly fewer people, the noise had almost died down, so even if they were noticed, no one would suspect anything bad. The guild headquarters was located in one of the largest cities of Clearland, and the demon could not resist asking Dea if there were many travelers there, to which Dea replied yes. They needed to get to a meeting with the guild master and obtain permission to live in the city, so the demon was scared, but the travelers encouraged her and asked if Dea had explained everything to her in detail. She nodded and said yes, and only then did it click in her head. They still hadn't introduced themselves to each other, so Ratsu and Dea said their names. The girl blushed with shame and shyly introduced herself Shitorin Torai, and Dea and Ratsu had already stepped toward her, ready to continue talking. Dea asks with interest where she lived before, and the girl, without hesitation, answers that it was Mount Kokuyo. Without immediately explaining the details, the girl, confused in her own thoughts, mechanically blurts out, "They say everything here always chars and burns." The man nods in confirmation of what he heard and says that in such a place, it is probably really hard to live, so he sincerely hopes she will not return there. The girl freezes for a second in silence, then tries to say something from the depths of her chest, and her eyes immediately fill with tears. The man instantly understood what she was trying to endure and sharply but carefully changes the subject, suggesting they have a snack. Ratsu prepares to set up camp and is already giving orders to Dea to prepare dinner while he himself intently assesses the place and time. They sit by the fire and eat, and when Ratsu and Dea ask Rin about the dish and if everything is okay, the girl always answers only one thing: everything is fine, and from this casual silence Ratsu begins to worry more and more. Rin swallowed another piece, and it was then that Ratsu noticed an unusual artifact on her and asked to see it closer, with curiosity quickly mixed with anxiety. Shuron looked at him sharply and warily, as if warning, and Ratsu immediately began to justify himself. He suspects Rin of nothing and just wants to understand what she is carrying. Dea gently intervened to ease the tension and explained to Rin that Ratsu is a true artifact lover. He often examines other people's things, then suddenly realizes how it looks, blushes, and shyly apologizes. He began to ask Dea when exactly she acted like that and why she even brings up this topic, then honestly admitted, yes, he is really interested in artifacts. The demon burst out laughing, and Ratsu and Dea, who were still loudly arguing, suddenly fell silent. Both looked at her, and with a warm smile stepped away from the dispute. She extended the ring, and the boy asked for permission once more before carefully taking it in his hands. He carefully read the characteristics of the dark ring. The artifact Dayu was level 1, the ring's magic was restoration, and the skill was photosynthesis. The boy saw nothing strange in the guild, recognizing it as harmless. Level 1 meant it had killed no one, so Ratsu was glad he managed to save it. He explains that demons are fed artifacts to make them kill people, yet Shitorin's healing magic is too useful to be underestimated. Next, the boy says that Shitorin saved a dog and healed it, so this sacred treasuring was worthy of Shitorin herself. Hearing this, the girl blushed and quietly said she would go to sleep. She lay down right on the log, and Da offered to turn her sleep into a cozier rest in the tent. Ratsu tells Dai that they also need to sleep, so they will take turns standing guard, and Dai calls Ratsu and recalls hearing from Janet about a special zone created to protect against demons. She asks if he knows about that zone, and the boy honestly replies that he has heard nothing about it. Dai explains to Ratsu that this place was created by guild members to protect innocent demons, and that most likely demons and humans can coexist there without hostility. Ratsu cautiously asks where exactly it is located, and Dai replies that such a place does not exist, after which he grabs his head and quietly mutters that coordinates would help him incredibly. He tries to understand why she mentioned this idea, and Dai denies it and almost directly hints that Ratsu is just as concerned about the girl who ended up in danger. Ratsu clarifies the details. It was not built but planned, and this thought sounds like cold proof that there were people like Ratsu and Dai themselves who care about harmless demons. Dea adds that even if other people consider her words a mistake, she still believes in the righteousness of her actions and does what she thinks is right. Ratsu flared up with bright light, thanked Dea, and promised to definitely find a home for Rin, and Rin herself quietly smiled in her sleep as if she heard his words. The next day, the travelers made their way through the mountains and crossed the turbulent water while Rin stayed cheerful and did not lose pace. They stopped for a moment and, looking at the path behind, immediately realized that they had covered a considerable distance that day. Rin and Dea splashed in the water, and Rin asked if Ratsu would join them, but Dea, blushing, explained that he could not be near the water. The young man was packing his things and constantly thinking about truly dangerous situations, while Dea and Rin ran up to him, apologizing guiltily for the delay. Suddenly, right in front of them, a whole squad of monsters appeared, filling the space with clouds of darkness and roaring. A demon that looked like a crocodile with scaly jaws and a twisted gaze solemnly declared that he had already found Shitorin. The girl and the travelers froze in fear as if nailed to the spot and stared at the multitude of demons gathering in a circle. The crocodile-like monster promised Ratsu a quick death if he handed over Shitorin, but immediately added, if he did not obey, he would kill him anyway. The young man was silent, clenching himself inside, and the crocodile could not stand the silence and lunged at him, threateningly ordering him to speak. The young man sharply declares that the monster is too slow, and with one blow cuts off its hand. The monster, holding its breath in fear, freezes, while Ratu raises his sword, squints, and swears that he will neither give up nor kill Shitorin. While the other monsters panic and prepare to flee, that demon involuntarily begins to guess who the man before him is. Suddenly, a white stick resembling a key appears in the air and raises a whirlwind that engulfs the demons, washing them away in the swirling light. When the whirlwind subsides, Ratsu lifts his gaze and sees someone sitting on a tree, holding firmly among the branches. A man dressed from head to toe in white sat still and insisted that those futile demons did not concern them at all. Before him stood a snow-white boy. His skin, hair, and eyes shone with the same deathly glow, and even the artifact at his side radiated whiteness, causing Ratsu to suddenly feel a strange pressure in his chest. The boy named Razu mockingly called him incredible and praised him for quickly defeating all the demons he had managed to gather. Ratsu asked the boy to come down so they could finally talk without unnecessary obstacles. The boy declared that he would take his target and raised his artifact, but Ratsu and Dai involuntarily became alert, sensing the approach of danger. In a moment, Rin found herself in the boy's strong embrace, and the feeling of warmth threw her off balance for a second. Ratsu rushed into battle and unleashed black lightning magic, but the boy reacted instantly, disappearing right from the strike's path. He thundered that this was not enough and declared that he still needed additional battle experience, to which Ratsu sharply screamed in anger and tension. Ratsu tried to fight with Snow White Boy, but every attempt broke against futility. The blows did not reach the target, and no maneuver yielded results. Suddenly they disappeared and immediately appeared nearby. The girl jerked her hand back from the unexpected displacement, and the boy, smiling, said he had a gift for her and asked if she wanted to take them with her. The girl again remembered Onyx and suddenly felt a wave of memory about the one who ordered her to run without stopping. The boy grabbed his artifact and the space seemed to be cut by light, and Ratsu froze in surprise looking at them. Rin had already taken a step toward the portal when Ratsu rushed to meet her and begged her to leave him, not choosing his salvation at the cost of herself. The boy called Rin. Tears were already in his eyes, and Rin turned around, looked at him, and softly, through the pain, smiled. She stepped over the threshold of the portal, and the boy, not averting his gaze, told Ratsu that Rin is a demon and cannot live among humans. The boy stepped over the threshold of the portal, gently saying goodbye to the traveler before disappearing behind the glow. They disappeared from sight, and Ratsu still stood in place, stretching out his hand forward as if catching the last echo of the event. The company of adventurers was walking near the city, heading in search of the demon, and one of the boys asked what would happen if they returned with nothing. Suddenly a demon appeared on their path, black hair, black horns, and dark skin from which emanated cold and danger. He listed 20 people and stated that because of them he would not have to go to the city, and one of the boys asked if he himself was the demon. The demon threw at the travelers with cold irony, "So you don't recognize me?" and then immediately commanded them to attack with authority. The travelers rushed forward with swift strikes, but none of their weapons could scratch or wound this demon. Gaining a pause, the demon asked if they were really determined to continue the attack and suggested they listen to him until the end. For a moment, the travelers were covered by a shocked silence. They looked around confusedly, asked each other who he was, and some felt a familiar strange echo as if they had seen him before. The demon slowly pulled his artifact from his bosom and, raising it in the light, proclaimed that he was one of the 7 great demons. Ratsu carefully examined the artifacts of the defeated monsters one by one, but each time found only a useless shell that had no use for synthesis. The young man stopped and began to think that none of the collected artifacts fit the required assembly, so hope for success was melting right before his eyes. Dia asked Ratsu why Rin had left, and at the same seconds his thoughts involuntarily lulled a doubt. Had they ever really been true friends at all? He remembered her smile before leaving Gan. From this, his heart grew heavy, but Dia hurried to cheer him up. How fun and warm it was for them together. Ratsu told her to ask Rin directly, and Dia clarified where they were going, and he replied that it was a unique ability of the demon for which they were setting out. The boy used the artifact to tear space and teleport, and the appearance of demons a little later was most likely a consequence of his actions. Ratsu tells Dia that he knows where Rin might be and insists the solution is near. He explains that he smelled something burning from the fault, and Day recalls how Rin taught them to recognize this sign. Ratu firmly decides to save the demon and declares that they are heading to Mount Kokuyo without wasting a minute. Next to the white snow, the boy and Shitorin suddenly appear in the cave, and the young man tells Onyx that he has already arrived, although Onyx himself was not there at that moment. From around the corner of the dark passage, a snake demon crawls out, flicking its tongue as if greeting the world, and the boy asks where Onyx is, to which the snake replies that he has just returned. Someone else immediately appears nearby and greets joyfully, causing Shitorin to turn sharply in fear. Onyx, seeing Shitorin, shines with joy and immediately asks if she missed him. The snake demon addresses Quartz, inquiring about the others, and finally hears the answer: their plan did not work. The court solemnly proclaims that Onyx knew not only that they were being taken to the royal capital, but also the exact route chosen for him. Onyx returned to Synth, and the snake only shook his head and replied that there is an informant in their guild, a renegade seeking revenge. Onyx, comfortably settled on his stone throne, smoothed his cloak and smugly declared that it is worth giving people money and they will betray anyone. Quartz nodded, confirming his words, and said he was glad to be of use to them, after which Onyx invited him to join his ranks. But Quartz refused, coldly explaining that if he agreed, he would no longer be able to cooperate with other factions, and only then did Onyx ask about his true goal. Quartz answered without hesitation and clearly said, he wants to destroy humanity. Onyx ordered Quartz to do everything independently, promising, if he succeeds, he can become the next Demon King. Onyx recalled how the previous candidate for the position was executed by a small red-haired girl, and Quartz waved it off, stating that it did not concern him at all. When Quartz was about to leave, Onyx stopped him and asked about the number of travelers, but the demon evaded a direct answer and only assured that they would not come. Since Rin had already come here herself, the adventurers had no reason to appear, so Quartz said goodbye and left, while Onyx only wondered why Shitorin came personally. Onyx pressed her tightly to himself and whispered that now she could finally heal his hand, but the girl sharply screamed, "Stop." She pushed him away sharply and demanded not to touch her, and when he touched Rin's artifact, he immediately realized she was still at level 1, and it unsettled him that she had not managed to kill a single person. He asked if this return happened because of her desire to heal him, and the girl shook her head. No, she simply did not have such power. He grabbed his head, regretting that her abilities were not enough. Suddenly he lit up as if he had just remembered something important, and declared that he had an idea. He called Synth and began to explain to Rin. After she disappeared, he started kidnapping travelers because he wanted to check if any of them could heal his hand. But none of them could. In their own anxiety, the girl stopped him in time, asked him to repeat, and he again stated that he kidnaps travelers. Rin remembered the examiner's words, and Onyx continued his thought. It was then that a clear idea flashed in his mind, which explained everything finally. He explained demonic artifacts become stronger when they kill people, and the process itself no longer matters. Suddenly, a motorized cart rolled up, and it was a vehicle. 2 such carts entered the cave, filled to the brim with adventurers, but the demonic serpent overturned them. A whole crowd of half-dead people stretched out on the ground, like shadows spilled from carts in the underground gloom. They plead for help, and Rin, stunned, freezes and looks at them, then sits down, and Onyx immediately asks what she is going to do. Onyx sharply grabs Rin's hand and explains that he gathered everyone just for her, let her level up and restore his hand. He presses closer, starts to squeeze Rin, and forcibly imposes the thought, trying to convince her to kill them all. In the forest, there is incessant rustling. Someone continuously leaves signatures on the path, as if running several kilometers and erasing the trail every moment. It was Dia. With all her might, she tried not to fall behind Ratsu, trembling and breathing heavily, apologizing, calling herself an obstacle, and asking him to go on alone. The young man tells the girl that they have already arrived at Mount Kokuyo, and the air around seems to thicken with anticipation. Shitorin involuntarily recalls his brother, how he took 2 names right, Torai, and how it sounded unusual but confident. Once Rin, still very young then, asked him why he had 2 names. The brother explained that people have a family surname added to the given name. He smiled and said, "This is soap, so I follow it," and Rina the younger, choking with joy, solemnly declared that from now on she would also be Shitoren Torai. Rina's brother sincerely loved people and admired them, because of which Rin jokingly called him human son, and he also cared about how exactly people named different bonds between each other. He loved her like a native younger sister. She was born on the same mountain where their family stories began with the whisper of the wind, and she grew up and responded to him with love like a true brother. Shitoren boasted about her ring artifact, which was solemnly presented to her, and its shape was exactly the same as the brothers, so in the light the metal played with the same pattern, like a mark of kinship. He explained to her the human custom. The ring is worn on the ring finger when two lovers sign a contract, and Rin suggests repeating this gesture to wear the ring as if their feelings are doomed to a vow. But Right refuses because they were brother and sister, and, nodding his head restrainedly, advises Shitoren to wear the ring on the right index finger so that the symbol does not turn their kinship into another meaning. He says that it is precisely thanks to her kindness that she received such magic, a power capable of healing both people and demons, so every word sounds like a promise of a healing touch that penetrates through the darkness. Smiling, he says that this artifact is perfectly suited for her. Rin thinks that peace will last forever until Onyx appears from the shadows. She remembers how she was walking through the forest until a demonic eagle fell before her, wounded, exhausted, and Shitoren rushed to help her. She releases healing magic and heals the demon, after which he suddenly gets up and immediately tries to run away. Shitoren puffs her cheeks because it seems to her that he didn't even manage to thank her, and that same day she is asked to forgive the demon. He was angry and wounded. The man praised her, but suddenly a strange noise caught in their ears, as if someone was approaching. Onyx came to their village to take Shitoren. Shitoren hid behind her brother while Onyx continued pressing his request to join so that she could restore his hand. The brother replied that she did not have such power now, so he asked Onyx to go away, but he hinted, the level can be raised if she kills people, and the brother sharply said that the girl did not want that. Onyx grabbed his head and asked if his communication skills were really that bad, then retorted, he did not ask, he commanded. Right clenched his palm and a magical ball flared up in it, blinding his eyes with a bright wave, after which he hurled it straight at the demon, causing a huge explosion and rumble throughout the space. Vrit boldly shrugged and threatened Shitoren to leave, but she sharply cut him off, saying she would not let him go, and while he tried to restrain the demon, Rin used the moment and fled into the darkness. Rin rushed into the human village where the streets smelled of smoke and cold night and began begging for help, stretching out her hands to the people and calling desperately while boys approached and cautiously asked if she was okay. She held her breath and tried to explain with a broken voice that something terrible had happened to her brother, but as soon as she said this, the boys suddenly froze as if the air had become heavier and something invisible had cursed them. They instantly realized that a demon was before them, and their faces twisted with fear because each decided that she could kill them, so they stepped back and kept their distance, not taking their eyes off her. The girl stretched out trembling hands to them and begged for help, swallowing tears and looking into the rescuers. She rushed to the man, but he just slipped away, and her ears were already filled with false orders to gather weapons. Peasants gathered around her, deciding to finish her off by force, and she involuntarily sank down, clutching her head. Suddenly, memories tore through her like the jaws of memory, and she returned to reality. Onyx was shouting at her to kill them. He relentlessly questioned whether she still wanted to help him, reminding her that he had prepared the entire plan specifically for her. She sharply reminded him painfully how he once took her by killing and exclaimed that she would rather die than heal his hand, and just then Onyx waved his artifact. Then he began killing people one after another without any pause, and Rin asked why he was doing this, to which Onyx replied, if Rin did not destroy them, he would have to do it himself. Since people were enemies of demons, Onyx intended to act calmly and unhurriedly, inflicting wounds as if calculating every step. In response, the girls screamed at him frantically, demanding that he stop immediately. Onyx sharply ordered his subordinate, and at that moment he felt someone approaching them. He ordered the snakes to take everyone nearby with them, and Onyx froze in surprise, trying to understand who exactly could be the target, when the girl was already focusing and ready to activate her artifact. She began healing people right on the spot, restoring their strength, and Onyx sharply turned away from the unexpected kindness, not believing his own eyes. One of the adventurers still could not come to his senses and believe in the rescue, while the girl methodically healed one by one, focused and without pauses. Synth emerged from the dark cave, and beside him, 3 demons stepped quietly, and he carefully examined the travelers as if he had already calculated every step. The girl asks why they came and declares that this is the Onyx Legion base, and Ratsu instantly realizes they have arrived exactly where they need to be. Synth disdainfully calls them fools, and D orders Ratsu to enter the cave, assuring that she will handle Synth herself. Ratsu grumbles that it is reckless and tries to dissuade D, but she firmly decides to protect her friends at any cost. Synth sharply orders to kill them, and Daya jumps down to the newcomers, swinging her shield, shouting to Ratsu to go into the cave. As soon as her foot touches the ground, Daya strikes the ground with her shield with all her might. A dull, powerful blow sounds, and she yells at Ratsu to run right now. Synth orders one of his comrades to detain her, but Daya interrupts mid-sentence. She will not let them pass under any circumstances. Shitorin continuously uses healing magic, saving people one by one, while Onyx only watches with a soft, self-satisfied smile, and the adventurers, unable to bear it, ask why she wastes her strength on other people's lives. They clarify whether Shitorin intends to defeat him by enlisting their help and bitterly admit that their chances are negligible, and Rin calmly replies she doesn't care and just asks them to run away. The adventurers are surprised and fall silent. Then Shitorin explains, since the demon has already defeated them once, she wants to save as many people as possible while there is still time. The adventurers apologize and rush to the exit, and Shitorin stands still, lost in thought and unsure if she did the right thing, while Onyx raises her artifact and makes a short, precise hand gesture. All the saved travelers suddenly get wounded simultaneously, as if struck from within, and panic and cries of pain immediately arise in the room. Onyx sighs and her face lights up with boundless sorrow. Every time she heals them, they get even worse. He says that he was only adapting to her, but Onyx suddenly realizes this only now. He sits down next to her and persuades her to put an end to their torment. He whispers that he heard from her brother at the moment of death. Shitorin is kind to both people and demons. He asks not to betray faith in her brother, places a stone in her palm, and orders her to free them from pain. Onyx takes a step toward one of them, and he tensely tries to say something to her before she touches the cursed body. He asks, "Kill me," and she raises the stone above his head, holding her breath, and recalls her brother's words. Suddenly, a voice sounds from the cave entrance, and he apologizes to her for being late. The girl looks at him in surprise, lowers the stone, and tears appear in her eyes. Radu approaches closer, assuring Shitorin that everything will be fine. A moment flashes in her thoughts. When she first met Radu and Dia at her home, thanks to her magic, she lost her brother. At that very moment, both people and demons seemed to her like the same enemies, because she did not even think that they could call her lost, since she had no place where she could truly belong, and it turned out that she was really lost. Shirit calmly tells Ratsu that she did not want his interference, and with dry surprise asks why he even came. She recalls how people tried to kill her, so she sharply asks why he wants to save her, since he still comes to help a demon who should not be her problem. Ratsu responds that even if she is a demon, she is still his friend, and therefore he will not back down. And as soon as they dive into conversation, Onyx cuts into the space between them, ordering Ratsu not to get involved where it doesn't concern him, while Rin prepares to level up by killing people. Ratsu watches Onyx intently, who predatory declares that the number of victims will increase by one more, and in the next moment lunges at Ratsu with the phrase, "You are my prey." While the demons, stunned by fear, still stand around and laugh, Ratsu sharply kills with a punch right in the opponent's face. The demon flew back, painfully landed, and could no longer believe his own action, trembling with rage and shouting that he will not forgive Ratsu. Shitorin again takes up healing people. She honestly warns that she cannot heal them completely, but will try to provide at least first aid so they can hold on until rescue. Ratsu begs Shitorin to stop because she has already reached her limit, but the girl stubbornly continues to heal and insists that only she can save them. She asks Ratsu if she is doing wrong by saving them, and Ratsu strokes her head and replies that her actions are truly worthy of respect. Tears flicker in the girl's eyes, and at that moment Onyx turns to Ratsu and asks him a question. He asks Ratsu if this means that he is challenging him, and Ratsu coldly clarifies, he came not only to challenge Onyx but to kill him. Outside, Deo is hit by an attack. Her shield withstands blow after blow, and the monsters hang shocked because she manages to protect everyone, while the serpent is already thinking about how to break through her defense. Monsters attack her one by one, but the girl repels them each time with her shield, until suddenly a threat appears behind. A monster sneaks up from behind. That girl reacted instantly. She raised her shield and struck the monster right in the face, causing it to fly away as if the wind was knocked out of it. The monster approached its comrades and with mockery and anxiety declared that it was dangerous. Supposedly, the girl barely hit properly, and the companions were already collectively inflating its strength, counting how many meters it was thrown back by that blow. Nearby stood the snake the whole time, and her face was clearly worried, as if she expected treachery, not a staged spectacle. There were several moments in this fight that didn't make sense, but the monster was most gnawed by another thing. The girl looked invulnerable. And then the monster finally realized the truth. The girl had a protective artifact, so she gave orders to her subordinates, and they were already preparing to attack all at once. The monsters hesitated as if afraid of her counterattack, and the snake scolded them irritably and urged them on, calling to be braver. Dea watched as they approached her plan. The monsters were gathering with a plan, and 3 demons prepared to attack simultaneously, synchronously rushing forward. The monsters rushed at her, and the girl was already ready to defend herself, but suddenly the snake flew into the air and broke into an attack, choosing the moment without hesitation. A stream of poison poured down on them from above, and Dea covered herself with a shield, but the poison still touched her, while the other monsters were already completely drenched in this dangerous liquid. It was a poison she could control with the power of her own thoughts, forcing it to fly where the strike was needed. The poison worked lightning fast. It cut off the victim's life even from a single drop that managed to touch the skin. The monsters, who were already working with the snake, didn't manage to say a single word. They only asked why she did this to them, and immediately died. The snake thanked its dead comrades for their help, and Dea threw the sword to the ground and sat right there, as if exhausted by the victory. The demon, however, froze in surprise. The artifact was undamaged after everything that had happened. The snake again began to spray its poisonous juice, and Dea covered herself with a shield, deflecting the splashes. Trembling with tension, she asked the monster what value of life could be behind all this. Suddenly, the snake burst into uncontrollable laughter, and then, swallowing laughter between words, said that it knew something important. The demon coldly told Dea that her artifact had no special abilities, just an ordinary thing, nothing more. Dea explained to the girl. At first it seemed to her that Dea was stalling for time, but later it became clear Dea simply had nothing left but to defend herself. The snake warned the girl that she should not have attacked the monster from behind, and at the same time noted with surprise that Dea neutralizes the poison, so almost immediately assumed this is only a passive skill. Dea brought the girl closer to the wound left by the monster's poison and said that the girl herself was unable to protect herself from the direct effect of this poison on her body. The snake growled and lunged forward. She wanted to burn the girl to ashes with her poisonous sting, and drops of poison hit her one after another, causing her to start burning. The demon, as if savoring her question, answers that all lives are futile and meaningless. She insists a futile life is not worth living, and the demon relentlessly adds 3 killed demons at the end of their lives are grateful to her for usefulness, while Dea could not even protect herself. The demon bitterly laments the boy who crashed into the cave, dooming himself to an irreversible end. And at that very moment, Dea attacks Shinto and presses her to the rock with a shield, while the snake hisses that no matter how hard the girl tries, not a single scratch will remain on her. The girl steps back from the snake, clutching her hand, and her skin is already burning. The poison left a burn. The demon screamed wildly in pain, and it became clear that the girl had deliberately touched his face with poison, so the body was burned. The demon lunged upward and began shaping a huge ball of poison which melted right in the air, while Dea helplessly watched him, as if fallen into icy fear. The demon attacked again, and the poison directly hit Dea. Dea lay almost unconscious, and the demon aloud wondered if the boy had resistance to poisons, but suddenly she saw the girl was still alive. Dea lay on the ground, her body burning with pain inside, and she remembered rats and cried, regretting that she couldn't manage without him. She recalled her mother's words not to cry just because she was teased a little, and Dea then told her that she was not an adventurer and lacked strength. Right after that, they asked which artifact she wanted. After a short pause, she clearly answered that she wanted a large artifact and added, If she doesn't like fighting, then at least she will protect people. As she stood up and took a step forward, her mother's instructive fear and a promise of luck to her comrades echoed in her head if she stayed close to them. The demon flew up again, gathering another ball of poison in the air, and boldly threw back at her that all the girl's efforts were in vain. The girl focused and began weaving protective magic for her allies, while the demon directed the poison straight at her. Dea intently watches the ball and recalls Rat's words. He will protect her and she will defeat the monsters, so she clenches her heart and tells herself that she is strong. Demon's poison bursts into the barrier and, like thunder, shakes the demon itself, but Dea has already leveled up the ability Mirror Shield, so the enemy's blows are reflected back. Dea sharply clicks a command to the monster, cutting off doubts with one move. You will not touch her team, and the air around seems to harden from her determination. The poison hits the barrier and flies back, arcs straight at the demon, and pierces him with a deadly blow, forcing him to shudder in pain. The poison envelops the demon's body from head to toe, and Dea, observing the consequences, says coldly and confidently, "You became an adventurer to find your parents." The demon died, and the girl, standing over the lifeless body, says in a firm voice that she is not useless, for she is a shield heroine. The girl moves toward the cave and begs Ratso and Shitoren to cling to something and hold on a little longer. She promises to protect them, and at that moment the space around begins to spin wildly, as if reality is tearing loose. Dee falls to the ground and no longer moves, frozen in silence after the blow. While all this was happening outside, events were already unfolding deep inside the cave, causing Rin to become nervous and restless. Radu and the demon gripped each other in close combat. The clang of artifact strikes collided closely, and neither allowed the other's defense to be broken. During another clash of artifacts, the demon stepped even closer and, throwing a compliment, told the young man that he had a wonderful weapon. Onyx replied he was so caught up in this fight that he even forgot to introduce himself, so he named his name and declared that he was one of the 7 great demons. Ratu managed to block the slash with his sword, but Onyx instantly pulled him out of range, drew him closer, and demanded that he also identify himself, after which Ratu sharply blurted out his name and jumped away from the demon. Ratu mentally admitted to himself, once great demons were generals and the Great War happened 300 years ago, so he was surprised that the general was still alive. The demon laughs at the young man and mocks him, as if hinting that he is hardly stronger than the hero who once took Onyx's hand. The young man suppresses the question within himself, but the demon unhurriedly explains that he once fought side by side with one of the strongest heroes during the Great War. Then, in the heat of the bloody battle, that hero suddenly grabbed Onyx's hand, and from that moment everything changed. After the war, the demon continues the story. The hero challenged him again, but eventually simply died of old age, and when Onyx hears rumors about a new hero, he finds that it does not affect him at all. The young man recalls the words of the great traveler. He claimed he would not become a hero, and the young man also clearly remembers everyone he once saved. Then and now he could not lose. He activated the Hellfire skill, and Onyx watched him closely, not hiding his curiosity. The young man rushed into battle with the demons, striking blow after blow with stubborn determination. He did not stop until the demons began to slow down and then completely stopped in place without resistance. Flashes of lightning captured frame after frame until the hero exhaled and stopped. The adventurers whom Rin was treating watched Ratu's fight with admiration, insisting that he was stronger than any demon, and Rin, looking at him, became thoughtful. She quietly hoped that Ratu would manage to defeat this demon, and her gaze lingered on how he took the hit. When the smoke cleared, Onyx stood amid the ruins. He mockingly asked the man about his love for fights and declared that if he had 2 hands, he would definitely clap. The demon solemnly announced that the warm-up was over and ordered to take the fight seriously now, and the man, in shock, asked again, not believing his own ears. Hearing this, the man opened his eyes in horror. The demon had not a scratch, so he only saw the demon raise his artifact and begin to cast a spell on him. The demon lunged forward and poured his own power straight into the man's chest, and the incredible thrust threw the guy from the cave into the field. Shitoren looked at Onyx in fear while he flew to the hole that Ratsu had made with his body, and told the girl that he would go deal with him. When he returned, he ordered her to level up, otherwise he would personally kill everyone, even Rin. Dea lay unconscious outside very close to her rats, which had fallen and no longer moved. The man could not believe what was happening, and when he remembered the true power of the demon, he immediately understood. Onyx had been just playing with him from the very beginning. Then he prepared to use double enchantment, but one thing scared him in his current state: he might not have enough power. He could not decide what to do next. His spells did not affect the demons separately when Onyx appeared and asked Ratsu to show what he was capable of. Rin told the rescued travelers that she would appear soon and make them run, but they begged her not to go there and to run away with them. The girl no longer wanted to run away, so Ratsu stood opposite Onyx, gripped his sword tighter, and prepared to use enchantment. But suddenly Onyx threw his sword aside, grabbed his head, screamed in pain, and could not understand what exact curse had befallen him. Onyx explained that it was a feature of his skill, an instant death curse, but the Ratsu artifact suppressed its effect. However, the curse still did not disappear completely, and the demon, rushing into attack, caught the phrase, "Do not die from a minor curse." The demon struck with momentum, and the boy managed at the very last moment to parry the blow with his sword. But despite the precise parry, he was still thrown into flight, and he froze from the realization. The attack hit him, and he could not fully repel it. Ratsu, half-conscious, thought that due to the difference in their abilities and because of the curse, he definitely could no longer keep his consciousness. The demon ordered Ratsu to stand up and fight for real, but suddenly froze and saw Shitoren running straight towards Ratsu. Ratsu's gaze sharply shifted, and at that moment he fiercely shouted at Shitoren. An intense fight erupts. Onyx strikes the girl, but Ratsu manages at the last moment to snatch her out of danger. Ratsu falls heavily and barely stays on his feet, lying exhausted, while the girl anxiously apologizes and asks if he is okay. A deep wound opens on Ratsu's side. Rin looks into the blood in panic and with a trembling voice guiltily whispers that it is her fault. Her eyes flash with tears, but she does not look away, determined to heal Ratsu and with hope reckons that he is still alive. She rushes to the spell, tries to use magic, but in vain. No glow, no response, and Ratsu barely opens one eye and warns that Onyx is already approaching. The demon calls her and mutters in a fit of rage that he spent so much effort to gather so many sacrifices for her, but now all that work has gone awry. He frowns and sharply asks why this time she does not run away like last time when she abandoned her friends. The girl lifts her gaze to the demon, compresses her words into a command, and coldly calls him a monster. Die. The demon swings his artifact, preparing to kill Rin, but suddenly receives a strong blow to the head sharply, unexpectedly, as if something deflected him at the last moment. It was a shield. The demon turns his gaze aside to Dea, blinks, and asks who she is, while Dea is already at the limit of her strength without any reserve. She stands still and looks the demon straight in the face, sharply asking how he dared to harm her friends, and the demon involuntarily realizes she defeated the serpent, but behaves as if it hardly concerns her. The demon tells Ratsu that he is terribly disappointed. He expected a truly worthy fight, but saw only a boy with a powerful artifact in his hands. Onyx pronounces the verdict coldly and mercilessly. He will make Ratsu watch as his friends die, and only then will he kill him himself. Ratsu, trembling with helplessness, reaches out his hand to the demon as he retreats and begs him not to kill Shitoren and Dea. Ratsu recalls his friend's laughter and, through pain and dust, begins to crawl forward, trying to reach at least something that can still be saved. Ratsu reaches for the sword, first pressing his whole body against the cold blade, then gathering his will to stand up and extends his hand for the strength for the next step. Ratsu asks for strength to protect the girls and destroy the demon, while Rin stands nearby, shielding Dea as the monstrous shadow is about to strike a deadly blow. But at that moment, a pillar of incredible magical power bursts out behind the demon, and the struck Onyx turns to the boy who for the first time shows a double spell. Two waves of energy intertwine in one move. Ratsu, gathering all the strength from the last grains of his own exhaustion, casts a double enchantment spell, and symbols flare in the air as if the sword is getting a new breath. The girls look at each other in confusion, and Onyx, swallowing his surprise, suddenly realizes Ratsu's hidden power was not a fantasy but real, and now it has just awakened. Ratsu crashes into the very hell of the battle, and Onyx, wasting no time, casts a death curse on his artifact. They collide, their powers tear at each other's limits, and both figures literally face each other without looking away. A giant explosion bursts, and the girls instinctively cover themselves, trying to protect from the shockwave and shards of magic. Shatoran sharply asks what happened to Ratsu, and Dea calmly explains his unique ability is to use two spells at once. Ratsu and Onyx clash swords, hurl magical streams at each other, retreat for a moment, and then rush into attack again, attacking without pause. The fight does not subside. Onyx laughs and whispers in Ratsu's ear that he likes fighting him, then slyly asks if that is why the boy became an adventurer. Onyx pins Ratsu's leg to the ground, presses him into the soil, and demands an answer whether he is a traveler to become a hero. But when the young man begins to resist, Onyx sharply objects. He became a traveler to stop all battles, not to fuel them. In a moment, and the sword whistles as it flies towards Onyx. The strike pierces him through, and when the blade is withdrawn, hot blood gushes onto the ground. The demon squeezes out the beginning of a phrase, "My flesh was," but cuts it off mid-word and shifts his gaze to Ratsu, asking, "So why don't you kill me?" He solemnly explains that this is his last chance to kill one of the most powerful demons and take a step closer to his goal. The young man silently looks at him while the girls whisper among themselves and curiously wonder if he has won against Onyx. Suddenly his legs give way, blood streams from his mouth, and Rin looks at him, stunned and helpless. The demon laughs, pausing, for his curse has finally begun to gnaw at Ratsu from within, and abusing the young man's weakness, he suddenly lunges forward. But Ratsu does not allow this to happen. He quickly raises his hands and tries to burn the demon and stop his attack using the magic of hellfire. When everything finally quiets down, the young man grabs his head and falls to his knees, pain tears through him from inside like red-hot tongs. He hardly thought but simply realized, if the fight continued a little longer, it would be the end, because his strength was already exhausted and his body drained by the curse to the limit. He suddenly understood how terrible the demon's power was, and at that moment his figure emerged from the thick smoke, stopping the gaze with fear. The demon, demonstrating complete superiority, orders Ratsu not even to hope for victory, speaking as if the verdict has already been signed. In shock, Ratsu sees he is still alive, although hellfire hit him directly and his sword has turned gray and become a rusty stub. Ratsu briefly asked his artifact if this was all it was capable of. Right at the moment, Rin rushed to him running. Rin quickly replied that it would buy them time while both of them escaped. Shitoren categorically refused to run away and declared that she would stay with him, and the young man burst out shouting, "Does she really want to die?" He voiced these words aloud, saying that they would all perish if Shitoren stayed there, and ordered her to run as fast as possible. She looked back over her shoulder, decisively took off running, and the young man mentally apologized to her and begged with all his heart, "Survive." He also whispered, "Deu, run," and she sharply asked if he was driving her away because she considered herself useless. She reminded him of his own words, that she would protect him as long as he fought. He said that she had become an adventurer to find her parents, so she could not suddenly die like that, and she cut in. She didn't care where exactly she died, the main thing was that she was ready to stand in his defense until the very end. Suddenly the demon lunged at them and mortally wounded Deu. They both clenched in silence and lay motionless, pouring out hot blood. Ratsu drew his sword, and as soon as the blade touched the light, it immediately transformed. Shitoren trembled at the thought that everything would go the same way again as last time, so she did not want to be the only one left alive. She wanted to save them. She rushed forward, trying to understand how she could help them, and just then one of the travelers called out to her. Shitoren jumped up to him and asked why he hadn't run away, and he replied that he couldn't leave her and wanted to give the potion. Shitoren said, "Keep this to yourself," but he shook his head and assured her that she needed the potion more. This elixir restored so much strength to a person that magic could only be used once, and it lasted for exactly one single spell. Moment by moment, the sword went deep into the human body, leaving a bloody trail and heavy silence behind. Ratsu twitched and screamed when the onyx saber stabbed into his shoulder. The demon snatched the sword and declared, "Now they are done for." Onyx boldly said that even with two hands Ratsu could not defeat him, and he seemed to deliberately laugh at his own advantage. The young man said, as long as he can move one hand, he is capable of winning, and at that moment Rin was running towards them but suddenly stopped, seeing that the demon was standing too close to Ratsu. He is approaching too close and she stands in his way, so only one question turns on in her mind: what to do next. She sees the wounded Dai and rushes headlong to her, but Dai, with eyes barely open, tries to whisper something to sew up Horan. Shadowrun reads her intention and quietly says, as if putting a period to her doubts, she definitely knows what to do next. Ratsu and Onyx engage in a deadly fight, and after one more strike Ratsu's sword flies out of his hand and Onyx with one move cuts off. That's it, he's finished. Onyx attacks, but his strike is stopped by Dai's shield, and the devil blinks in surprise upon seeing her, then sharply shifts his gaze to Rin and suddenly realizes it was her. While the demon was frozen in confusion, Ratsu grabbed his artifact and rushed forward, preparing to strike. He unleashed a powerful sword swing on the demon, the blade whistled and struck directly at the target. Before dying, the demon recalls the words he once said to Rin's brother. No village will save her, yet he ordered Onyx to believe in Rin's connection with people. The demon laughed bitterly with contempt. Humans are his enemies, and the young man begged them to save her before dying. But now Onyx was split in two, and the demon felt a chill at the thought of how exactly humans and demons are connected. The demon didn't even manage to draw his sword, and as soon as his life ended, he immediately vanished from this world as if he had never existed. Ratsu fell heavily to the ground, utterly exhausted, and the girls rushed to him, unable to believe that the danger was finally over, reaching into his embrace. He pressed them to himself and quietly choked on tears of joy, only now feeling true relief. They were alive. The girls broke into sobs, admitting aloud how scared they were and how long they had held back their fear. Through the torn clouds, sun rays suddenly broke through, highlighting two sabers lying nearby under a dark cloak. In the largest city of adventurers, amid the noise and lights of the streets, a decisive meeting takes place. Shitoren stood before the city leader together with the travelers she managed to save, and her convincing story impressed the ruler, so he gave Rin a permanent residence. Ratsu slowly opens his eyes. Above him is a ceiling with a massive chandelier, and next to him smiles Dea, shining with joy that he has finally woken up. He hoarsely asks where they are, and Dea replies that this is Kryland, after which Ratsu freezes and cannot believe his own ears. He recognizes in these adventurers the same people whom Shitoren saved that day, and now he understands. It was they who brought him to this city, so the young man asks her to repeat the last words. Dea says that Ratsu slept for a whole 2 days, and immediately a wave of surprise rises in his chest, and almost immediately he asks about Rin with a trembling voice. As soon as he asks the question, only quiet snuffling is heard in response, and he sees Rin sleeping right under his feet. He gently smiles at her and tenderly runs his fingers through her hair, causing Rin's eyelids to involuntarily tremble and her eyes quickly open. Rin suddenly wakes up and immediately understands that the rats are no longer sleeping. She greets him with good morning and is wildly happy that he has finally woken up. Shitoren begins to ask if anywhere hurts and how he feels, and at that moment the door opens. The nurse confirms that he is already conscious. Rin tells him that he had a very deep wound, but now it is almost completely healed, so he has nothing more to fear. The man sighs in surprise. His wound healed in just 2 days, and he sincerely thanks the nurse, then adds that it is not only her merit. The rats gratefully look at Rin. The nurse shrugs and explains that Rin has amazing healing magic, so when he finally got citizenship, she simply hired him. Dea thanks the travelers for convincing the city leader, and he replies that Shitoren is lucky. Citizenship was obtained so quickly. With doubt, she asks if everything is really alright, because if she is not nearby, she will not be able to heal him, and Rats calmly assures everything is fine. From the very beginning, they were looking for a safe, permanent home for Rin, understanding, if he is with them, she will constantly be in danger. Day smiles and the boy continues and says that there could not have been a better outcome than this, and the girl honestly admits he is right. The doctor was already about to leave when suddenly she remembered the guild master's request to bring Rats to him, so she stopped and said, "Rest well today." The door slammed and that boy, left with the girls, admitted that he was nervous before meeting the guild master, and they calmed him down and advised not to overthink it. The boy asks how the girls are feeling. Rin answers that everything is fine, but involuntarily remembers that the day has returned. Rats cautiously calls her with his back, and the girl replies, "The back has already healed, but the wound was too deep, that's why the scar remained." Rats asks the girl, "Show me," but she laughs and refuses to show, while Rats stubbornly does not back down a step. The girl slightly pulls her shirt down, and Rats notices a scar that stretches almost halfway down her back, like a reminder of past trouble. The girl asks permission to get dressed, and Rats suddenly begins to hurriedly apologize, with a guilty look, admitting that each of her wounds seems to have happened because of his weakness. He grabs his head and with a trembling voice says that her precious body suffered because of him, and promises to become stronger to protect both of them. But Dea sharply stops him and coldly cuts off, protection is my job, after which she adds that from then until this moment he has been useless. Ratsu tells her that she has been protecting him from the very beginning, and the girl sits sadly, as if truly lost in thought. The young man leans closer and adds that if it weren't for her, his adventure would have ended long ago, but there is a bitter gratitude in his gaze. The girl immediately comes to life. She raises her head, reminds about her promise to protect, and solemnly emphasizes that from now on this scar will be proof of her determination. Dia smiles and jokingly calls herself a sword-bearing heroine, and Ratsu immediately clings to these words and begins asking about her heroic reward, while the girl only explains, she just called herself that. Shitoren looks at them and rejoices that they have become themselves again, while meanwhile in Whiteland somewhere in the distance events unfold, full of inevitable tension. Helio accepts his artifact and sighs, saying that he is back in action again, and complains as if he lost a whole bunch of time, while his friend only briefly comments on his haste. Helio silently steps away and does not respond while his friend asks if he is even listening, and suddenly Helio stops and apologetically says that he is sorry. The friends clearly did not expect this from him, and the young man begins to calm Helio, assuring him that he was just joking, and since they are friends, they should share the punishment together. Helio sharply raises his voice, demands that his friend shut up, and promises that they will complete the task as soon as possible, breaking into a shout. Helio stands in front of the building, looks ahead, and says that they need to earn more merts, and his friend suggests looking for another place to work. Between the walls of neighboring houses, two boys were quietly talking about the broken altar and how the team of heroes managed to get involved in this dangerous story. Helio calls the boys, takes a few decisive steps toward them, and one of his friends tries to stop him, whispering that it might be a trap. He approaches closer and dryly asks where exactly the altar is, and the boys are struck by his impudence, so they pretend with feigned indifference as if they do not understand what is being talked about. Helio's face flares with anger, and he asks the same question again as if pressing with words, not averting his gaze. Not far from Kryland, a crab-like monster lets out a battle cry and, swinging its claws, swiftly attacks someone in the shadows of the streets. The monster fought side by side with Amendia's friends, and the girls simultaneously sprang into action and cast spells to attack. The monster's claws are cut off, and the twins are already preparing for a new attack, and this time Eamsty joins them. They deliver the final blow and kill the monster, and Eamsty smiles and says it was just a trifle. As soon as they became adventurers, the girls cannot believe it and immediately rush to the adventurers' capital, where Eamsty explains why she decided that way. She adds that it has nothing to do with information about where exactly she might be in this city, and the friends call her silly. Amethyst's friend hesitates, feeling that leaving Dea alone with the rats is wrong, but Leipai shakes her head and objects, looking forward stubbornly and dryly. She tells Amethyst that they should be grateful to him because he saved their lives, and her voice sounds convincing and noticeably relieved. Amethyst glances at Leipai and growls, and her friend, holding back tension, jokingly compares her to their stepmother. The girls were just heading to the city when they were suddenly stopped. Guild personnel appeared before them. The girls quickly explained that they were going to report on the completed mission, and the personnel politely thanked them for their efforts. But still, the staff asks the girls to go with them supposedly. The guild master wants to see them personally, and in their looks lurks the feeling of an inevitable important conversation. Raz wakes up the next day and starts getting ready to head to the guild headquarters. The travelers thank the doctors for their care, but they ask them to wait a bit while Shitoren gets ready. The adventurer, pressing the worn onyx to the sacrifice, calls the boy over and is about to address him on behalf of everyone who was in the cave. The boy bows and sincerely thanks, but Raz sharply puts him in an awkward position by asking who he is. The man replies that he was one of those in the cave, and adds, the rats also get completely disoriented, that's why he himself got too caught up in the fight. The rats recall that they already helped Rin submit a citizenship application, but the boy immediately cuts in. What they did is not comparable to what rats have already achieved. And Rin just smiles, that is more than enough, and sincerely thanks them for their support. Shitoren comes out in medical attire and asks them to express their opinion about her appearance, and the rats together with the traveler respond in unison that she looks simply wonderful. Dea worries that the villains might come for her, but Raz calms her down. Nothing like that will happen, and asks Rin to promise him one thing. Rin starts to get nervous because there have been too many promises from Dea, and Dea explains, It's not just that they are leaving, they will also be planning to visit her. The adventurer stands behind Rin and quietly says that the rats will be remembered as true heroes for a very, very long time. In Shitorin's head, memories of their first meeting flash one after another, like a flash of light in the darkness. Tears stream down the girl's cheeks, and she calls them back with a trembling voice. They turn around and Rin, torn between crying, thanks them with broken gratitude for everything they have done. Meanwhile, in a completely empty place, a conversation about Onyx's death takes place, and someone coldly claims that it is not that important. Allegedly, Onyx was one of the weakest. Quartz looks at the interlocutor with a puzzled face and says that he once heard Onyx was one of the strongest. The demon replies that Onyx was indeed strong while holding on with both hands, but he was not interested in that at all. He wanted much more, to find out the name of the one who killed Onyx. Quartz only admits that he does not know the name. Still, Quartz confesses that he remembers a detail. The killer wielded a rusty sword, and then one of the 7 great demons sitting on the throne solemnly declares that he will remember this important sign.